Suddenly, a bright flash emerged from the sky, causing loud noises, after which a long-haired man appeared, slowly leaving the battlefield. Behind him, the dawn was visible, and he himself was glad that everything was finally over. But suddenly, the reader noticed some lines at the end of the book, stating that the author was stopping writing. At the same time, the butler walked calmly down the long corridor, without rushing. Knocking on the door, the young man began to speak about the letter that had arrived for His Majesty. But before he could finish speaking, a loud shout was heard from behind the door, saying that the writer should, at least, have finished his book. The boy opened the door slightly, apologized to the person sitting in the room, and entered. His Highness rose from his seat and demanded that Adam approach him. The man asked what number the butler saw on the page, to which he, thoughtfully, replied about the number 19. His Highness shouted again, confirming that it was volume 19, not volume 20. The boy did not understand if this was the end and what would happen to the heroes of this work. Dame noticed that his superiority, who is considered the best boyfriend in the empire for his appearance, intelligence, and composure, behaves this way only when reading a book. The butler had known him since childhood and therefore understood how he worked. His Highness asked him not to exaggerate and finally asked what his interlocutor had forgotten here. Dame immediately revealed that a letter had arrived from the imperial palace for his superiority. Without uttering a single word, the boy simply took the envelope in his hands and looked at it carefully. After only a couple of minutes, he returned the letter and realized that it was about marriage again. Without even looking, because he is next after Abel, but he made a deal with his father, and he is not going to back down. However, if they were going to spend the rest of their lives together, then it would be better for his superiority to do everything himself. Elisha Weber, who wrote a book about the return of the knights, reread her own lines, sighing deeply. Suddenly, a maid entered the room, checking if the young lady was awake yet. The girl sat up in bed, hugged her pillow, and awkwardly greeted Lily. During breakfast, the young lady began to wonder where her mother would be. The maid conveyed her mother's words, that the girl would be forgiven for being late, but that the next day she would have to start attending etiquette classes. During the meal, Elisha could not understand what true freedom was without bridal lessons, preparations, and prohibitions on writing. She remembered her mother's words that the young lady was forbidden to write until she got married. The woman spoke of how her daughter disgraces the family because at her age she refuses to marry and does not attend social gatherings. Elisha stood up and shouted because she was not doing anything wrong, she was just helping the children. The young lady was surprised to learn that there would be no more concessions, otherwise she would be sent to a convent. And after that conversation, she was caught drawing a portrait and cannot even write in secret, because the maids watch her everywhere. The girl looked thoughtfully out the window, looking at something behind her. Someone who will be a little indifferent and will not bother the young mistress. Someone independent who will respect her only source of happiness. The girl sincerely did not understand where she needed to find such a person. Then, little Elisha received a gift in the form of an elaborate fountain pen with a precious stone. The little girl looked at the gift with admiration and couldn't get enough of it. The girl immediately ran into her father's arms, joyfully thanked him for this, and then ran out. The children noticed that it was the first time they had seen Elisha so happy and cheerful. The head of the family explained that the baby liked books and thought she would like to write. The woman could not understand what benefit this would have for the little girl. The father explained that there was nothing wrong with this because she was still a child, and she liked it. In the corridor, the boy asked the girl again if she needed the diary. Hearing an affirmative answer, the girl admitted that she would like to practice writing letters and at the same time promised that she would not interfere with her brother's training. Then, awkwardly, she asked if he could still help her a little. After a short silence, the boy nodded and agreed to help his sister. Elisha immediately smiled and thanked her interlocutor for agreeing. And finally they began their training, starting to write better and better each time. The mother, who saw how Elisha began to write, agreed that the handwriting looked elegant. The woman did not understand if her daughter really wanted to be a writer, because she considered such a profession despicable. She immediately warned the little girl not to even think about it, and that it would be better to devote her free time to studying body language and etiquette. But Elisha immediately decided to go to the library to practice as much as possible. Looking at every bookshelf, the girl noticed something strange. She did not understand if they had such a book before and immediately began to look at it. The boy, seeing his sister, quietly approached and leaned over to see what she was doing. Suddenly, the little girl turned and said what a wonderful book she held in her hands. Elisha noticed how different this was from the old-fashioned stories she had read before. The little girl excitedly recounted that there were characters flying in the sky and talking rabbits, and even winged ponies, as if she were in a dream. Elisha shouted that she wanted to become a writer and write the same kind of books that would make readers feel as if they were in a fairy tale. The brother patted the girl's head, telling her that she would surely become a good writer. After which he asked if it was true, because Mom would not like it because writing is a despicable profession. The boy took Elisha's hand, squeezed it, and told her that everything would be fine and that someday she would understand. The brother asked the little girl to cheer up because he had a gift for her, which he asked her to keep secret from her father and mother. The girl remembered that not a single book was sold, but he always supported her. That is why now only her pseudonym remains, and she does not know if she can continue writing. But Elisha really wants to write. She wants to read and wants to keep up with all the news. The maid called the young lady and told her that she had only turned away for a second, and that she was already in front of the bookstore. Elisha took the girl by the hand and begged her to give her only 10 minutes and nothing more. The maid asked not to look at her because it wouldn't work, and she arrived with firm determination. But in the end, Lily agreed to 10 minutes and said it wouldn't be her fault if Elisha was noticed. The girl immediately entered the store, starting to look around. Elisha looked at her writings and realized that she had to finish her book as quickly as possible. Suddenly, she realized that it was sticking out from the books and that someone might get hurt. Or the book could be damaged. The girl placed a ladder against the shelf to straighten the protruding part. Quickly straightening the book, the young lady smiled cheerfully, satisfied with herself. But when she started to descend, the girl felt her foot slip off the stairs, and she began to fall rapidly. Elisha immediately grabbed her working hand and realized that she could not hurt it. Otherwise, she would no longer be able to write. But realizing that she felt no pain, the girl opened her eyes slightly and looked around. After which, she immediately noticed a guy who caught her and was already asking if she had hurt herself anywhere. The young lady sat up abruptly, realizing the whole situation that had just happened. She began to awkwardly explain that there was a book sticking out at the top, and that her dress had gotten caught under her leg. His superiority looked towards where the girl had fallen, examining the book. The boy did not suspect that the aristocrat herself had read such a book. His superiority handed the book to his interlocutor, thinking that she was trying to get it. After which he said it was time to leave, moving away from the young mistress. Elisha watched her superiority, not taking her eyes off his fascinating appearance. Suddenly, a maid appeared from behind, calling the young lady and wondering what she was looking at. The girl dismissed her and asked if the promised 10 minutes had already passed. Deciding to leave the bookstore a little early, the young lady began to look around and heard a familiar voice. Finally, Kiri appeared, happily greeting her friend as she hadn't seen her in so long. The girl noticed that it was quite unusual for Elisha to be the first to ask for a meeting. With a sparkle in Kiri's eyes, she suggested that her friend had some kind of love trouble. The young lady laughed briefly while her interlocutor awaited the story. In the end, after listening to her friend, she realized that her parents wanted to marry her off to a man whose face she hadn't even seen. After which the girl began to wonder what would happen to Elisha herself. What her ideal man would be like. Such a question confused the young lady, and she thought about it. The girl suggested that it should be a person who would not pay attention to her. Elisha wondered what else was important in her ideal man. Suddenly, the girl's head remembered her superiority, and she wondered if he had been hurt when falling from the stairs. Elisha's face turned slightly pink as she remembered the boy and realized this. The interlocutor called her. The girl came to her senses and convinced her friend that everything was fine. And then, touching her fingers, she said that not long ago she saw a handsome boy in a bookstore. Kiri asked if that was what she heard, to which she received a positive answer. And then she came to the firm conclusion that the young lady had simply fallen in love with a stranger. Elisha understood that if she had to get married, it would only be to such a handsome man. The girl believed that such a face would be an inspiration for her novel. Smiling, the interlocutor suggested Elisha try to choose a boy on her own. And pointing her finger at the young lady, she called her to the ball, asking her to trust. That same evening, his superiority along with his butler were traveling in their carriage. Looking out the window in complete silence, the servant awkwardly cleared his throat and asked his interlocutor if he was worried about something. His superiority immediately turned his gaze to the butler, saying that none of that had happened. The boy sighed deeply, remembering how he spent the whole day looking at a book in a store that the author decided to finish. His superiority began to speculate aloud about how much the author of the book had written, and suddenly stopped, suggesting that it was all due to an illness or a cold. Dame did not understand why the interlocutor did not simply contact the editor and find out everything. The man said he didn't care at all, and the butler realized he would have to contact them himself. His superiority said nothing, lost in thoughts about the past day. The boy's memory returned to a girl in a bookstore who fell down the stairs while looking for a book. Suddenly, he turned back to his butler and asked him to bring him certain documents upon arrival. Already at the mansion, Dame brought a pile of papers to his superiority's office. Looking at something in the document, the man asked to put everything on the table, pointing at it with his hand. Duke Armand read the next letter and realized that they were all trite and banal, but they could not be ignored. His superiority thought about marriage again and wondered what he should do. Saburo, the most fertile land on the continent, is a peaceful land where there has been no war for decades. Its former emperor increased the prosperity of this country and had 3 sons. The first and eldest was Merkin, who became the emperor's successor. The second was Leviathan, who received the title and territory after heading to Tara, the southernmost periphery of Saburo, and bringing prosperity to the lands. The third married, but the couple died in an accident shortly after Lessa was born. The imperial family took charge of his education, but the young man immediately lost the empress's favor because Crown Prince Abel was weak. Due to the empress's growing anger, the boy had to hide in the library all day. And his only friends were books and the sweet young Abel. But one day Leviathan, who had no children of his own, adopted a nephew who had lost his parents. So no one expected him to live to be 10 years old, but Abel still grew up. And Leza, who moved to Tara, also went through a coming-of-age ceremony. He inherited his parents' estate and became a duke. After which, with the emperor's permission, the empress began to select brides for Leza. Girls without any power. The duke understood that in such an important matter, it was better to choose alone. His superiority wanted to do everything slowly when he had a desire. But if an heir suddenly appears, he will be able to fully inherit Tara. The duke inherited the river and the lands along it, and this was due to the huge success of the hot spring business. Lessa remembered the words that the rest of the land would pass to his heir when he appeared. It would be better for his superiority if she was an indifferent person, if marriage could not be avoided. It was important for him that she would not worry when he spent long periods of time reading books in the library. And it is better for her not to criticize the fact that the duke reads novels. One who does not interfere in Lessa's affairs, an indifferent, independent wife. And independent is like looking for a needle in a haystack. While reviewing documents and thinking, his superiority suddenly noticed something. The duke noticed on the sheet the image of an unknown girl from a bookstore. The boy realized that this stranger was the daughter of Marquis Weber. The butler immediately noticed the change in his superiority and wondered what was wrong with him. The duke thought that in life the girl was brighter and more luxurious, but in the portrait everything was conveyed differently. Dame asked if Lessa would go there in person, and he immediately asked again, without understanding where he had to go. The butler immediately mentioned the ball, smiling and showing envelopes with invitations to attend. At the Weber mansion, everyone was bustling around, realizing that the ball was only a day away. The maids helped the young lady choose an outfit for this event. In the evening, the girl stretched and realized how luxurious that hell was. She believed that with such success, she would definitely marry any man who would be completely far from her ideal. The young lady again remembered the man from the bookstore, wishing to find someone like him. Taking a sheet of paper and a fountain pen, the girl began to write down qualities for her future husband. Suddenly, Elisha wondered if such a thing really existed. Due to the nature of the empire, working women after marriage are rare. Both spouses work only in poor families to feed themselves. The rest should focus on secular society to gain information and increase the husband's influence. That is why writing among women is frowned upon, which is why Elisha wrote under a pseudonym. The young lady again remembered her mother's words, that she would only be allowed to engage in this activity after the wedding. The girl believed that she would scare away all suitors with her hobby, and therefore decided to keep it a secret, and asked for a personal account. During the ball, guests saw the young Mrs. Weber, who rarely appears. The girl appeared in the room in an elegant dress, instead of with her friend Kyrie. Elisha chatted with the event guests, had fun, made friends, and drank. After a while, the cheerful girl went out onto the balcony and realized how many people were at the ball. The young lady examined the glass of drink and realized how difficult it was to even stand. At the same time, Kyrie learned that the Duke of Armanda himself had come to the ball. Talking among themselves, the girls realized that the rumors that he was looking for a bride were true. One of the ladies begged Kyrie to accompany her because the Duke of Armanda is her uncle. The girl was surprised that Lessa would attend such an event, and at the same time, Elisha was at this place. Who, even under penalty of death, would not want to leave her room? Kyrie found this an interesting coincidence and began to look for her friend. The young lady was still resting on the balcony, breathing fresh air, when she suddenly heard a sharp sound, and was startled. But looking to the side, the girl noticed an equally frightened cat on the railing. The young lady sighed with relief, realizing that she was only afraid of the animal. Stepping back, the girl suddenly felt that she had bumped into someone behind her. Without moving away, Elisha immediately turned her head to look at the man standing. Next to her, she immediately saw a tall man, whose face seemed quite familiar. The girl finally realized the situation, quickly moving away from the Duke and apologizing to him. Without saying a word, Lessa looked intently at his interlocutor, thinking about something. But suddenly the girl approached him again, wondering if he had forgotten her. The Duke finally remembered that they had already met in a bookstore. After which, the young lady immediately smiled, thanking him for that help, and wondering if the foot he stepped on was okay. Elisha began to explain that a cat suddenly jumped out, which scared her, and told him she was sorry. Keeping her face proudly, the Duke reported that everything was in perfect order. At the same time, he could not understand where the rumors about finding a bride came from. He couldn't even imagine that there would be someone on the balcony when he fled from the crowd of girls. Suddenly he asked if that place was too dark for the young lady to be alone. Elisha awkwardly explained that she felt a little stuffy, so she went to get some fresh air. The young lady realized that she now looked like a person unaccustomed to balls, and suddenly said that she could leave if she was embarrassing Duke Armand. But Lessa immediately explained that everything was fine, as he came to the balcony for the same reason. At that moment, Kyrie squeezed through the guests, still looking for her friend. The girl did not understand where Elisha could have disappeared, who had recently been by her side. Looking towards the balcony, Kyrie suddenly saw her friend with the Duke. And as she approached, she immediately noticed how well they looked together. And moreover, they also have quite similar hobbies. Both are head over heels in love with books and everything related to them. And both hate clutter. The girl calmly decided that she should not interfere with the enjoyment of the moment. At that moment, one of the ladies ran up to Kyrie, wondering if she had seen the Duke. The girl immediately covered herself with a fan and said that there was no one on the balcony, and then pointed to the entrance, inviting her interlocutor to inspect it. The girl immediately ran in the indicated direction, realizing that she could not miss Duke Armand. Kyrie smiled at that moment, satisfied with her work. Standing on the balcony, the Duke and the young lady were silent, not knowing what to say. The girl did not understand why they had such an uncomfortable atmosphere and wondered what was best to do. Having found a topic, Elisha began to ask her interlocutor about the purpose for which he had come to the ball. Because he doesn't seem like a person who enjoys such things. In response, he hinted that the young lady was the same, which made her laugh awkwardly. But after a brief conversation, an awkward silence reigned between them again. The girl rested her hands on the railing and admitted that, in fact, she needed to get married. And looking at the sky, she said she couldn't find the right person. The girl said that it turned out not to be as simple as it might seem. Duke Armand responded by admitting that he had the same situation. Suddenly, the boy asked if the young lady liked the book he had helped her get. But the girl turned away, saying she didn't have time to read. Duke Armand just exhaled heavily as he realized something. The young lady suddenly remembered that Carrie might be looking for her. The girl quickly returned to the room, saying she had to leave and that it was nice talking. But suddenly, the Duke saw a piece of paper on the floor, picked it up and unfolded it. After quickly reading a couple of lines, the boy smiled at what was written there. Upon entering the main hall, the girl immediately found her friend and called her. Before she could reach Kiri, the young lady felt one of the aristocrats bump into her, who immediately apologized. Having said that everything was in perfect order, the girls immediately decided everything and went their separate ways. Suddenly, Elisha felt that the paper with the qualities for her future husband was missing. The young lady remembered showing the sheet to her friend and explaining that she was going to marry that person. After reading what was written, Kiri asked if the girl was serious. Kiri asked to quickly hide the piece of paper and not show it to anyone. The girl hoped that no one would understand what was written there because the paper was already crumpled. The young lady did not understand what she should do now or what to do about it. Kiri suddenly asked why her friend had come alone from the balcony. The young lady raised her head, asked again, and did not understand what the interlocutor was talking about. But the girl decided to quickly change the subject, wondering if her friend was hungry. Hearing that Elisha's throat was a little dry, she finally suggested leaving. And finally, Kiri, with a smile on her face, looked towards the balcony, where not long ago her friend was with the Duke. The girl realized that ultimately this could result in something interesting. Already at his mansion, the Duke looked again at the paper he had picked up. The boy realized that what was written was the content of the book he loved so much. At the same time, he remembered that the young lady had said she had never read novels, which seemed strange to him. The words of the girl that she needed to get married appeared in the Duke's memory. But he couldn't find the right person. Lessa looked at the documents and realized that he wanted to talk to Elisha again. Duke Armand supposed that they had exactly the same hobbies and that they could suit each other. Lessa believed that if their ideals were similar, it would be enough. The next morning, the young lady slept soundly in her room, not wanting to wake up early. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, and Elisha's mother entered. The woman approached and demanded that she get out of bed quickly and wake up. The girl immediately felt embarrassed by the fact that her mother was smiling, which was unusual for her. She sat down next to her daughter and asked her not to be too surprised by what happened, and then said that she had finally received a marriage proposal. The young lady immediately jumped up, asking loudly and not believing what she heard. The mother asked Elisha not to waste time and to get ready quickly. The maids immediately congratulated the young mistress on receiving the marriage proposal. The girl still looked at them with the same incomprehension of the situation, hearing that she would be more beautiful than usual that day. And finally, the young mistress put on makeup and dressed, waiting for what happened next. The maid looked at Elisha, admiring how especially beautiful she was that day. The girl said dissatisfiedly that she was like a chicken in a net, but they were interrupted by the butler, who said that the lady's carriage was already ready. The mother asked not to forget what Elisha was taught, so as not to disgrace the Weber family. To which the girl immediately smiled radiantly, asking the woman not to worry about it. At the same time, at Armand's mansion, the butler was talking about how special Lessa looked. The Duke, taking off the glove from the other hand, asked to be more careful with his words. Dame continued to say that he did not expect such a drastic decision from Les. Irritating him, the man turned to his butler and suggested that he better get ready. Leaving the mansion, Lessa was ready to get into the already prepared carriage. Duke Armand took out a letter from the girl, examined it, and noticed how round the letters were. He was sincerely interested in the expression on Elisha's face when she read it. If he even saw it. The Duke expected the young lady to smile like him. Elisha thought she was a little worried about the unexpected proposal. The girl could not understand for herself whether everything would be fine in the end. Getting out of the carriage, the young lady immediately saw a luxurious garden with a fountain. The girl walked and looked at everything around her, admiring how beautiful this place was. Suddenly, she heard a voice next to her saying that she was a little late. The young lady looked at the Duke, examining him and immediately recognizing him. But she quickly came to her senses and introduced herself as Elisha Rose Weber. The Duke smiled at her, inviting her inside to hide from the sun, which did not spare her. The young mistress immediately noticed how affectionate the boy was and how much she liked him. The Duke decided to introduce himself formally and introduced himself as Lessa Black Armand. Hearing the boy's surname, Elisha's eyes widened and she slowly realized something. After all, the family of Duke Armand, who has the right to the throne, arouses universal admiration. The girl did not understand why the Duke, whom everyone envied, liked Elisha. The young lady never thought she would receive a proposal from him. Suddenly, the girl asked her interlocutor if she could ask him something. Elisha leaned forward and asked if the Duke had really fallen in love with her at first sight. Lessa pushed his cup away, asked again, and looked directly at his interlocutor. The girl laughed awkwardly, saying it was a joke and realizing that such a thing was impossible. And then she asked why Duke Armand really needed this marriage. Lessa calmly replied that he had fallen in love with the young mistress. The girl could not believe what she had just heard from her interlocutor. And then the Duke said that this was not just any proposal. Moreover, he asked Elisha's family for a regular meeting. The young lady felt embarrassed that her mother understood everything completely differently than it turned out to be. Suddenly, Duke Armand pulled out a small piece of paper, pushed it towards his interlocutor, and told her that he had found it that day at the ball. The young lady reacted immediately, quickly getting up and taking the paper from the table. The girl crushed it in her hands, covering herself with a bright blush and moving away from her interlocutor. Duke Armand apologized and admitted that he had already read the content, after which he calmly invited the young lady to marry him. Lesser explained this by saying that he had the same thoughts as the lady. That is why he said he fell in love, because they were both looking for people similar to themselves. And then he asked her to tell him if Elisha wanted anything from him. The girl awkwardly asked if Duke Armand could really guarantee her freedom after the wedding. Lessa smiled and said that of course he could guarantee this to Elisha. Then he asked to be given a room into which no one would enter, including the servants. And the Duke? The boy asked if this should be something like a secret room. Elisha immediately jumped up, asking not to misunderstand her, because she meant her personal story. And then she also asked for separate sleeping places, because they have bad sleeping habits. She said cheerfully that during the day everything is fine, and when she is not sleeping, she looks like a person. Duke Armand asked if this was all the girl wanted. Elisha asked if Leza abused alcohol and heard that there was nothing of the sort. After re-examining the interlocutor, the young lady noticed that his appearance was completely adequate. His family might be too much, but the girl can accept it. Still, she noticed that Duke Armand listened to all her requests. Lessa asked if he could now add something to the lady's words. The first thing the Duke said was that he would respect Elisha's personal space. However, she will definitely need to maintain her dignity as a duchess. Without thinking twice, the girl smiled and accepted Duke Armand's terms. Elisha wondered if her daily prayers were working for her future husband. Or the Duke has some problems in the form of huge debts, or something else. But then the young lady realized that this would only be possible if the country came to an end. Lessa interrupted the lady's thoughts, offering to sign a marriage contract if she wished. Elisha understood that even in the case of an arranged marriage, a written conclusion is very rare. This happens if the head of the family is a single girl, or if she greatly exceeds the status of her partner. After thinking quickly, the girl asked if they could write it down immediately. Duke Armand quickly called his butler to bring them the documents. Dame immediately approached the seated couple and placed papers on the table between them. The young lady signed the document without further ado and then examined it. The Duke immediately informed the girl that it would be better to state her most intimate desires before the marriage. Elisha looked at her interlocutor, asked again, and did not understand what he meant. The boy immediately cleared his throat and said that he had expressed himself incorrectly. Duke Armand immediately explained that he needed a partner and heir to his family. And the president of the Supreme Court, Marcus Weber, and Lessa's father are close friends. This means that no one will speak against this marriage, especially considering that they knew each other beforehand. Duke Armand promised to hold the wedding ceremony in a month, and then, getting up from his seat, he invited the girl for a walk because they had finished with the contract. The young lady extended her hand in response, agreeing with Lessa's proposal. After leaving the premises, Elisha said how beautiful everything was in the place. The Duke said that, after the wedding, she would be able to admire this view at any time. Elisha immediately smiled and admitted that she liked the idea. Suddenly, Lessa announced that he had a question that immediately interested the lady. The boy immediately noticed that his interlocutor liked reading books very much, to which Elisha admitted that she did not like reading books at all. But when she heard the question about what kind of books she liked to read, the girl fell into a stupor. Awkwardly and uncertainly in her voice, the young lady replied that she liked textbooks. After thinking to herself how she really told her interlocutor nonsense, Elisha knew that she would never be caught reading or writing books. The Duke pretended to be very sorry because they could have discussed the history of Raiden. And Elman, as the girl suddenly approached, saying that it was not Elman who was right, but the holy Lady Isabel. Lessa smiled slyly, reminding her that the young lady herself had told him she hadn't read. Elisha realized this, which immediately made her feel uncomfortable about the situation. The girl justified herself by saying that she only read a little at the end. And then she turned away, saying that it was true and covering herself with a slight blush of shame. Duke Armand only smiled silently while observing Elisha's behavior. 2 weeks later, the news had already spread throughout secular society. The emperor was so happy about the union of the disinterested duke and the young lady of the Weber family that he even wrote a congratulation. Their wedding preparations were quite stressful, but everything went well. The mother wanted to achieve the ideal by asking the servants to show the dress again. And the jewelry. The girl did not understand why this was necessary because she had already looked at everything. The woman only demanded not to talk nonsense because her daughter's wedding should be perfect. The girl realized that, although it was an arranged marriage, she was now really getting married. Suddenly, her brother Roll appeared nearby, and the lady was immediately delighted with him. The boy noticed that his sister was more beautiful every day. After which, 2 more of Elisha's brothers appeared in the room, noticing how beautiful she was that day. The taciturn Manus approached his sister, patted her head, and briefly congratulated her on her wedding. Roll asked Elisha to return to them at any time if her new husband suddenly offended her. The girl immediately thanked her brother for his concern with a smile. After which, the mother asked the boys to leave the room and go to the palace, because they were still busy. Leaving the door, Elliot frowned, saying nothing but thinking. The boy knew less from the academy, but he was not at all friendly. He was a man obsessed only with his own feelings. He immediately began to worry, because his Elisha would be more suitable for a kind person, and not for the icy Duke Armand. But soon Elliot was walking down the corridor of the palace, where the ceremony would take place. And Duke Armand himself walked towards him, noticing a familiar face. Having reached a sufficient distance, the boys stopped silently facing each other. Realizing how much time had passed since they last saw each other, Elliot decided to ask if the Duke was already feeling weak. Lessa smiled faintly, believing that his interlocutor was simply being ironic. But the boy replied that it was nothing of the sort, and then asked him to take care of his sister. Immediately smiling, Duke Armand agreed with his interlocutor. At the same time, Lessa noticed that Elliot had not changed at all, exaggerating with his concern. The Duke unexpectedly said that Elisha was no longer a child. Hearing this, the boy immediately turned, wanting to reply something. But Lessa, without waiting for a word, was already moving away from his interlocutor. The boy firmly decided that he would never leave if Elisha suddenly felt a little unhappy. Not far from the palace, the ladies were sitting at a table, looking around, and noticing the Weber carriage. The ladies gossiped that it was rumored that Duke Armand and the young lady fell in love at first sight. One of them believed that Lady Weber fell in love first, which the second immediately began to deny. The lady said that the Duke was the first to send a marriage proposal. Lessa, finally waiting for the young lady, came out to meet her and helped her out of the carriage. Already seated at the table with a cup of tea, Duke Armand wondered if the lady was having a hard time. Elisha immediately explained that there was nothing of the sort, wanting to add something, but stopped. The Duke asked again what else the girl wanted to tell him, but just by looking at Les, sitting opposite, her beauty struck him. The girl could not understand why Duke Armand was as handsome as the main character of some novel. Elisha admitted that she thought they wouldn't see each other before the wedding. The boy was surprised, not thinking that she looked like such a busy person. The young mistress admitted that she was busy because she needed to lose half a kilo or more in a few days. Hearing from the girl how difficult it was sometimes to restrain herself, Lessa chuckled and said that he would like to switch places with her to carry this burden. Elisha suggested that she felt better with those words from Duke Armand. Suddenly, directing her attention to the sky, the young lady noticed how full the moon was. Pointing it out to her interlocutor, Lady Weber admitted that she loved her and all the stories associated with her. With a smile, the girl asked the Duke if he had heard the legend of the full moon. The boy remembered that he had read about the legend in one of the episodes of the book about the return of the night. But he smiled at the girl's face and asked her to tell him more about it. Elisha began to tell that a long time ago there lived a maid who unrequitedly loved her master. But the girl understood that they could never be together. And realizing this, the maid offered her prayers to the moon every day. But she did not ask for love, she only prayed to make him happy. The owner had a fiancé, and even after his wedding, the maid continued to pray to the moon every day. One day, the wife overheard this prayer and punished her for daring to look at her owner. After this incident, the maid fell into a forest lake and immediately drowned. But the moon goddess, who heard every prayer, took pity on her and made her confidant. They say that now she helps unrequitedly in love people like her. To this day, in Andara, lovers pray before the wedding and bathe in the lake water, believing that thanks to this, they will never part. After this story, the Duke wanted to ask the lady something, starting first because after a week there would be no turning back. The girl immediately realized that Lessa wanted to know if she regretted what happened. Elisha knew that, on the contrary, she was happy with how things had turned out. Duke Armand also regretted nothing because he himself chose this marriage. The girl asked Les not to worry, to fulfill their agreement. Then they can finally be free and happy. On the wedding day, the maid admired how beautiful Elisha was. The girl exhaled with difficulty, turning to her mother and telling her how hard it was for her to breathe. The woman only asked her daughter to be patient until the end of the wedding ceremony. She ordered Elisha to be patient and the maid to touch up the future duchess's cheeks. The maid immediately got to work and brought the girl a glass of drink. After taking a sip, the young lady exhaled, preparing for the ceremony. And now the time has come. Elisha walked proudly towards another life. Many guests had already gathered in the hall and were talking among themselves. Those around them admired the couple, who calmly walked down the aisle, and attracted everyone's gaze. Duke Armand quietly asked the lady if she was worried. Elisha immediately admitted that her mouth was already dry, although there was an expectation that she would not worry. The Duke suddenly noticed that the girl's lips looked moist. Finally, the couple reached the ceremony site, waiting for what would happen next. The priest began his speech about whether Lesabrak Arman was ready to marry Elisha Rose Weber. The Duke, without hesitation, swore with all his heart, without lies, to love, respect, and be a faithful husband for the rest of his life. The Weber family mother, seeing everything that was happening, was even moved. The priest turned to the girl and asked if she was taking an oath. Eliseo Weber, with a slight smile on his face, replied with the same oath. The man smiled happily as he looked at the couple and gave them the blessing of the goddess of love. After which the priest handed them a glass of drink, inviting them to take it. Duke Armand was the first to take the glass, taking a small sip and leaving some for the lady. Elisha Weber drank the rest of her drink calmly and elegantly. The Duke quietly asked again if everything was all right, and heard the cheerful girl's positive response. After the ceremony ended, the couple also began to be together again. Once in the palace grounds, each of them spoke with the guests. When suddenly Eliseo was called by the voice she was most familiar with, to which she immediately turned around. The brother approached, patted the girl on the head, and told her how incredibly beautiful she was. After which 2 more brothers appeared, confirming that their sister was the most beautiful. Eliseo threw herself into Roll's arms, rejoicing at his arrival at the ceremony. Manus looked at his sister and remembered how small she was not long ago. After which, he sternly asked if Duke Armand was taking good care of her. Eliseo asked with a smile not to worry, because everything was fine. Roll said in surprise that they didn't have to worry about her. The boy knew that his sister would probably do something during this time. The young woman looked at her brother with displeasure and asked again. Elliot interrupted their conversation and again asked them to let him know if things got difficult. Eliseo promised to do so if anything happened and thanked her brother for his concern. Suddenly, Kyria appeared behind Manus and asked if they were bored without her. The girl immediately noticed how beautiful Eliseo was and congratulated her on her wedding, and then asked where Duke Armand himself was, looking around. The young woman explained that Lessa was talking to her parents. Kiri demanded that they let her know if Duke Armand suddenly did anything strange. The girl confidently promised that she would never let him down. Eliseo laughed cheerfully at this situation, rejoicing in the kind of people surrounding her. Also laughing, Kiri decided to ask if the girl was ready yet. But the young woman looked at her friend in surprise, not understanding what she meant. Kyrie leaned close to the lady's ear and began to whisper about the dress after the party. The young woman felt a little embarrassed, realizing what her interlocutor was talking about. The lady was already expectant, because Weber does not usually wear this color. Eliseo admitted that she was actually a little worried about this. Suddenly, the girl was sternly called by her mother, who had been on the sidelines the whole time. The boy decided not to delay his sister, urging her to go with her parents. Eliseo said goodbye to everyone and promised to see her a little later. Elliot exhaled heavily after her, still worried about his sister's future. Suddenly, Kiri noticed this action and looked at the boy next to her. Suddenly, their gazes met, looking at each other without saying a word. Elliot was the first to speak, nudged with his elbow, and asked if the lady needed an escort. Kiri, without thinking twice, accepted, taking the boy's hand and thanking him for the offer. Once at the palace, Eliseo quickly put on an elegant red dress. The maid, looking at the girl, exclaimed how beautiful she actually was. The maid explained that she would definitely need to wear such beautiful clothes at the Duke's estate. Eliseo said clumsily and uncertainly that she would try. And finally, the door to the hall, where the ceremony continued, opened. The future Duchess appeared before everyone with a slight smile on her face. Duke Armand noticed her immediately. At first, he thought she didn't like things that were too luxurious. Lessa approached, smiling, inviting Lady Eyre further together. Thus passed the entire celebration, conversations with guests, congratulations, and looks of admiration at the newlyweds. A few hours later, the girl went out into the hallway and realized how much her back hurt. Suddenly, the Duke approached her, telling her that the room they had agreed upon was on the second floor. Lessa suggested that Alicio go there and get a good rest from the day. The girl asked if she could really walk, because she was quite tired after all this time. Duke Armand explained that a maid would be waiting outside the ladies' door. The boy immediately warned Alicio that the name of her new maid was Chachu. The girl immediately thought of what a cute name this was for a lady. Finally, Alicio said she would go first, wishing Duke Armand a good rest as soon as he finished. Wanting to relax quickly, Lady Weber began looking for the right maid. But after looking around the corridor, Alicio saw no one and did not understand where to go next. The girl found it strange that no one was there and decided to call the maid by name. An unfamiliar voice was heard loudly behind the Duchess, startling her. Alicio immediately turned around to finally see her new maid. But instead of a pleasant lady, she saw a tall, serious girl behind her. And with a calm face. The Duchess already thought she had simply made a mistake and called the stranger by name. But she immediately answered, which only meant that she was the right servant. Chachu introduced herself, saying that from that day on she would serve Alicio. The girl clumsily explained that she needed to go to her room on the second floor. Chachu bowed weakly and said she would take the Duchess immediately. After which, Alicio walked directly behind the maid, trying to keep up. The girl walked and thought about how long Chachu's steps were. Finally, the maid stopped in front of the tall carved door and said she had to go there. Entering slowly, the Duchess gasped in surprise and beauty inside. Initially, the girl expected to have only a small room to work in. But everything turned out much better. Alicio looked at the interior of her new room with admiration in her eyes. The girl was pulled out of her thoughts by the maid's voice, announcing that, with a word from the lady, Chachu would prepare everything in the best possible way. With bright eyes, Alicio thanked her interlocutor and told her she would think a little more. Finally, the maid explained that if the Duchess needed anything, she would have to pull the rope. Alicio asked to heat the water for the bath because she was preparing to go to sleep. The next morning, before she woke up, the girl learned that Duke Armand had left. Chachu said that the boy asked her to convey his words that the lady should rest in peace. The girl understood everything immediately and said that the maid could be free. Alicio immediately decided to get down to business and placed the sheets of paper on the table. Suddenly, the girl found an envelope among all the papers. At that moment, the Duchess remembered that she needed to send a letter to the curator. The girl also thought about leaving alone, but she didn't know if they would allow her to leave the estate. The Duchess hoped not to be surrounded by guards everywhere. The girl assured herself that this could not happen and that it was all just her fantasy. But as expected, Alicio was not released alone, but accompanied. Suddenly, the girl noticed that an employee from the publishing house was standing there. Alicio could not understand if there was any way to resolve this situation. The girl ran to the publishing house employee and told her how much she missed her. Alicio offered to have a cup of tea, winking and hoping the lady would play along. The publishing house employee understood everything right away and apologized for not being able to attend the wedding. Upon arriving at a quiet place, the girl began to say that it was a great honor for her to see Alicio so soon. The Duchess, before starting the conversation, apologized for being so surprised. The lady accepted the apologies and wondered if Alicio had any good news. The girl said that she could soon continue writing and that her interlocutor would receive a letter about the next meeting. But at the same time, Alicio understood that it was unlikely she could write it quickly, because she still needed inspiration. The employee felt that the author could not generate momentum for the ending because it was too rushed. The girl understood that this was possible, but the readers were already waiting for her with all their might. Unexpectedly, the employee offered to publish a short story while the lady was resting. At that moment, Duke Armand was talking to his assistant and asking if there was any news. The butler admitted that no one could determine the author's identity. Dam was told that the writer had to interrupt the publication of his books for personal reasons. The butler asked what the Duke was going to do next. After thinking for a while, Lessa decided to help the writer. The boy understood that if there wasn't enough money, they would simply sponsor him. Or if the author suddenly falls ill, they will simply help him recover. Duke Armand announced that he would personally go to the author of the books. The next morning, the girl woke up peacefully, stretching. But suddenly, the Duchess was startled to hear the maid's voice wishing her good morning. Chachu explained that she thought Alicio would wake up soon, so she wanted to prepare water for washing. The girl agreed to have all this prepared for her, smiling happily. Duke Armand, who had woken up much earlier, was already looking at documents while drinking tea. And when he heard a knock on the door, he allowed entry. Alicio immediately looked from behind the door with a radiant smile on her face. The Duchess clumsily said that she had just come to greet Lessa. Duke Armand approached. He explained that it was not necessary to come for such a thing, and then asked about the lady's sleep. Having said that everything was fine, the girl began to ask about her husband's well-being, calling him by name. Without answering, Duke Armand fell into a stupor thinking about the lady's words. And then the boy immediately blushed, embarrassed that Alicio had finally said his name. The girl, unexpectedly and clumsily, offered Lessa a joint breakfast. Duke Armand put his arm around the lady's waist and promised to do the same for her. Looking at the girl next to him, Lessa smiled happily at her presence. Duke Armand lost himself in memories of when he arrived at the desired meeting place. Thanking them for the visit, the man invited them in to talk. On the way, he asked the Duke what business they had contacted him for. Instead of giving explanations, Lessa asked his butler to bring him an envelope. Seeing it, the man immediately realized that Duke Armand wanted to support the writer. Unfolding the envelope, he began to read carefully what was written on the paper it contained. The aristocrat learned that the author had taken a break for personal reasons, which the director of the publishing house confirmed. Duke Armand earnestly asked for his proposal to be conveyed to the writer. The man immediately agreed and said he would deliver everything personally by hand. The Duke thanked him and changed the subject, offering to talk more about the project. Lessa, looking at his wife, sharply said that her morning had been entertaining. But the boy only downplayed the misunderstanding of the girl, who didn't know about their meetings. Walking behind Duke Armand, Alicia was in a hurry and couldn't keep up. Turning around, Lessa noticed that for some reason the girl couldn't keep up. The boy immediately stopped to wait a little for his wife. But bumping into her back, he looked at the standing Duke with incomprehension. It seemed to him that Alicio felt uncomfortable in this outfit, and he asked the lady about it. But the girl clumsily explained that everything was actually fine. And then Lessa realized that he had walked too fast and held out his hand to Alicio. Because of this, for a few seconds the girl even felt embarrassed by so much concern in his direction. But then, smiling happily, she grabbed Duke Armand by the arm. The Duchess decided to ask Lessa if he knew that he was very affectionate. The man explained that Alicio's dress simply didn't look very comfortable to wear. The Duchess laughed and said that this is exactly the same concern. The girl admitted that even at their second meeting, she thought Lessa was a very scary person. The aristocrat looked at his wife in incomprehension, not understanding why she thought that. Suddenly, Duke Armand seemed to realize the girl's words. He asked the lady if she thought he was scary, and she began to explain that Lessa was handsome. But scary. But the Duke began to deny it, saying that he was not like that person at all. The Duchess immediately laughed at this situation, which brought a radiant smile to her face. The couple quickly arrived at the indicated place and also quickly had breakfast together. And after that, the two entered the territory of the Armand estate. Saying goodbye, the Duke tenderly kissed his Duchess, which only made her happier. Finally, Lessa and his butler stood in front of the servant, who explained where they should go. Entering the room, the Duke immediately began to apologize for making them wait. His Highness the Prince spoke about the rumors that the groom who had just celebrated the ceremony was already absorbed in his work. And then he asked if Duke Armand liked the gift he had given him. Lessa thanked the boy for his concern, and then told him he would take a break as soon as the pending work was finished. But His Highness the Prince could not understand if the Duke had opened it. After all, his wife noticed, and said that everything looked quite luxurious. But the boy quickly changed the subject, saying that after eating they would go together. And to Les's questions, which he didn't understand at all, the prince explained that he needed to buy a gift for the princess. Duke Armand exhaled deeply and only said that he understood everything. But then His Highness unexpectedly said that Charon could not live without drugs. The guy reported that hallucinogens were distributed everywhere, and that trade was taking place among aristocrats. Lessa immediately explained to his interlocutor that they should not act too hastily, but rather improve their vigilance. His Highness the Prince exhaled deeply because he had already done everything possible in such a situation. The guy asked Duke Armand to find out the details of these matters, just in case. Lessa immediately felt it, indicating that he understood his role in this situation. At the same time, somewhere in a dark alley, something that should not have been known was hiding. Many aristocrats hid their faces under identical masks. There were many empty bottles on the tables to help them relax in this place. But unexpectedly, many hands dragged the unmasked girl around the room. In the end, she was thrown to the floor, right in front of a boy with bright hair. And striking, he examined the newcomer, wondering what had happened. Sitting in the carriage, Duke Armand remembered everything that had happened during that time. Not long ago, at Les's request, a man observed the latest trends in the north. Many people say that it is secretly sold in alleys, pubs, and gambling establishments. Taking out the package, the man handed it to Duke Armand as forbidden things in Saburo. After which, they told him about symptoms such as hallucinations, visions, and severe addiction. But then, upon learning that one of the smuggling routes had been detected with a large shipment, Les's face darkened. The man immediately warned his interlocutor that there were probably other routes. Finally, Lessa demanded that all routes and distributors be found. Already in the carriage, Duke Armand was thinking, trying to sort everything out. The boy knew very well that the composition could match what Charon did. Near the estate, the maid personally met the Duke and his personal assistant, greeting them respectfully. The Duke first asked where he could find his wife and heard that she was walking in the backyard. Lessa looked in the right direction, not understanding why at such a late hour. The girl was calmly in the garden, surrounded by many beautiful flowers. The Duchess looked calm, contemplating nature and smiling easily. Lessa, finally catching up to her, immediately asked her why the lady was outside at this hour. After which, he immediately threw a jacket over her shoulders, noticing that the weather had become colder. The smile on the girl's face became brighter when she realized that Lessa had finally returned. Duke Armand smiled and apologized for his late return to the estate. Eliseo was indignant and said that the guy had returned too late. The Duke calmly asked why the lady was walking and not sleeping. The girl spoke of Dam's words, who said that the night views on the duchy estate were beautiful. After looking around and noticing that the boy was not exaggerating at all. The smile never left Les's face as he looked at the happy Elisha beside him. Hearing the offer to return, the lady accepted because it was really great. On the way to the estate, the girl asked the Duke not to overexert himself. Lessa suddenly asked if Eliseo was really that worried about him. The girl stopped and said that they are spouses now and everything is as it should be. Then the Duke clumsily rubbed his neck, agreeing with his wife's opinion. Finally, having decided everything, Lessa suggested continuing to his estate. Already preparing for bed, the happy girl combed her hair, which had gotten tangled during the day. Suddenly, the Duchess remembered how Lessa had called her his wife. The girl was immediately confused by the memories, so she covered her face, not knowing what to do. Eliseo still couldn't realize or accept that she was his wife. The girl fell onto the bed, increasingly embarrassed. The Duke had just gotten out of the bathroom at that moment, drying himself and exhaling. Memories of his Eliseo, her features, and her gentle smile arose in Les's memory. The boy smiled, also accepting that they had now become spouses. The next morning, the Duchess sat in front of the mirror and chose jewelry. The maid at that moment was interested in knowing if the lady would at least have breakfast. With a bright smile, Eliseo said she had an appointment where she would eat. Already sitting at the meeting place with an envelope in her hand, the girl couldn't understand what this meant. The interlocutor explained that everything was as she said, and that Eliseo would understand when she looked at the documents. The lady said that in the future the Duchess, hidden under a pseudonym, would receive a large sum as a donation. Eliseo immediately shouted after learning about such donations. The interlocutor explained that not long ago, an aristocrat personally came to the publishing house with an offer. The girl remembered how he expressed his desire to support writers who are in difficult life situations. And there was even a separate conversation about Eliseo's books. The Duchess immediately noticed the edge of the sheet that did not contain the sponsor's name. The lady pointed out the lack of a signature, to which she heard that the aristocrat wished to remain anonymous. The girl exhaled deeply, wondering what she should do with all this now. She returned the paper and explained that she could not accept it, although Eliseo was pleased with her wish. The publishing house employee immediately said that it would be difficult to refuse. The lady was speechless when she learned that her refusal could lead to the cancellation of the publishing house's support. But after that, Eliseo began to firmly say that she could understand his feelings, but that the only price the reader should pay is the price of the book. The employee exhaled deeply, realizing that everything happened as she thought. The girl promised to convey Eliseo's words to the director so that he could take care of everything. Suddenly, the Duchess asked if she could find out who the sponsor was. The interlocutor explained that she herself only knows that he is an aristocrat of the highest rank. The interested girl thought about it, only understanding that such things happen. But still, the idea of an anonymous sponsor was firmly stuck in her head. Duke Armand was calmly reading books on his property at that time. Thoughts about his happy wife resurfaced in his memory. These memories brought a slight smile to the Duke's face. Lessa realized that his wife should not hide her passion for reading. The Duke eagerly awaited a book about the return of the knight to discuss it with Eliseo. At that moment, the girl was finally returning to the Armand estate. Eliseo sighed deeply, not expecting that something like this could happen to her godfather. She decided that it would be necessary to write an appeal to the readers so that this would not happen again. But still, the Duchess was wondering who the highest-ranking aristocrat could be. One of the Armand family maids was walking calmly down the hallway, carrying a decorated box in her hands. Upon reaching one of the estate doors, she knocked, expecting more. Dame immediately looked from behind the door and thanked the maid for her good work. Closing the door behind him, with the box in his hands, the butler cleared his throat. On the contrary, Duke Armand was waiting for his new words and actions. The butler placed the box the maid had brought on the table. The Duke remembered the words again, that if he got bored, he could always go to Eliseo. And then he remembered the prince's words that the more gifts, the better. After all, just a couple of days ago they were together at Saks jewelry store. Duke Armand and His Highness immediately began to attract everyone's attention. The smiling prince asked them not to pay attention to them and to mind their own business. Noticing one of the shiny decorations, he approached and examined it. The prince said that this shop is very popular among all the girls. The boy showed one of the necklaces and said it was a good gift for Madame Duchess. He convinced Duke Armand that Eliseo would definitely like it. Lessa was still thinking about giving a gift to his wife. His Highness suggested one of the jewelry sets that might be suitable. Lessa imagined how this jewelry would look on the Duchess. Duke Armand immediately smiled and realized that it would definitely suit her. The prince noticed that his friend chose jewelry, whose stones perfectly matched the color of Eliseo's eyes. Duke Armand sincerely hoped that his wife would like it. But now Lessa wondered under what pretext he should give the gift. The boy immediately asked the butler what the Duchess was doing. When asked to go alone and find out, Lesser objected that he was busy. Hearing Dame try to say something else, the Duke frowned. Noticing the look, the butler agreed that the guy was indeed very busy. And then he turned to find out what the Duchess was doing. Only when he was left alone, the guy got up from his seat. Along with a gift for his wife, the Duke looked towards the hallway behind his door. And soon Leza stood in front of the door, to the room where Alicio was. The guy turned to Chuchu, who was nearby, and asked her to call the Duchess. A minute later, a girl peeked out from behind the door with a radiant smile on her face. Duke Armand smiled as he handed the box to Elisha and explained that he had come to give it to her. The girl examined the gift and wondered what was inside. Lessa said that they say the more gifts, the better. The Duchess was surprised that it was for her because the boy had already given it to her last time. Lessa was embarrassed realizing that Alicio accepted that gift, thinking it was from him. And not from the prince, deciding to talk about it later. Looking at the Duchess and seeing her reaction, he began to think that the wedding gift was too much. Or that she didn't like it. The girl seemed to try hard to say that she would accept it with pleasure. Thinking that Alicio didn't like it, the Duke said goodbye to her, promising to see her again. The girl immediately caught up with him and asked him to wait a little. But Lessa didn't even turn around, moving further and further away from her room. The girl exhaled, not knowing what to do now, because her expression was regular. The Duchess tried to find out why Lessa showered her with everything. Closing the door behind her, Alicio began to think where to put the gift now. Looking at the pile of unopened gifts, the girl felt even more embarrassed. The Duchess looked at one of the gifts and realized that she had never found the strength to admit that she didn't like it. The girl couldn't even imagine that Duke Armand had such strange taste. But in the end, Alicio firmly decided that she had to find out everything. The girl ran out of her room and boldly headed straight for Lessa. Finally, Alicio stopped at Duke Armand's door and decided what to do. The girl tried to calm down and then gently knocked on the door. But not hearing a response, the Duchess stared in disbelief. The girl tried to figure out where Duke Armand had gone so quickly. Suddenly, she heard voices and decided to get a little closer to them. The girl in the corner tried to listen to what those there were saying. Duke Armand did not understand what damn meant when he said that his superiority's tastes had changed. The butler only explained that they were too different from what they were, but Lessa immediately warned him that he was not going to give in like that. The butler sighed deeply, realizing that sometimes you have to do that. The Duchess covered her face in embarrassment and immediately realized that Dam was also aware of everything. But at the same time, she was caught by Lessa's words that he had no desire to give in. The girl realized that she was the only one who had no idea. Later that evening, the newlyweds had dinner together, sitting opposite each other. Duke Armand clumsily asked if everything was all right with his wife. Alicio calmly said that everything was fine and asked what he had noticed. The Duke could not understand if the girl was hot in those clothes, because they were in a rather warm room. The girl immediately understood what he meant and said that everything was quite normal for her. Lessa warns his wife that if she has any pain, she should call a doctor. She nervously shakes her head, trying to show that she is really happy with everything. Anxious to find out the reason for her strange behavior, he asks if she likes the food. Starting to shout, Alicio repeats that everything is fine. She claims that she really likes the clothes that reach her neck. The girl looks at the person sitting opposite and realizes that he is clearly uncomfortable. She gets a little restless and starts thinking about what she should do. The boy asks her to eat fruit because it is very refreshing. Annoyed, she declares again that she has nothing good. Lessa smiles slightly, indicating that he has understood this for a long time. The girl suddenly remembers that the Duke said there would be no turning back. That day, the girl asked him not to worry, promising to honor their agreement and to be free and happy. She understands that everything was really simple, with just words. Suddenly, the Duke asks if his wife wants to tell him something. Alicio decides that it is time to finally tell her husband the truth. She begins to mumble something about desires, which greatly surprises the boy. The girl is shy and cannot find enough suitable words. Lessa reports that he does not quite understand what she means and then asks her to speak freely. She talks about some moment when that same desire is not satisfied. The Duke looks at her questioningly, not understanding what this is all about. Eliseo confusingly asks how he acts in such situations. The boy realizes that she asked a rather peculiar question. He, smiling, asks her if she really wants to know about that very desire. Lessa says that we all have desires, and he doesn't know what exactly bothers her. But everyone has their own preferences. The girl says that she understands perfectly, and it's not that she has bad preferences. She realizes that nothing can be done in this situation, and she will have to say everything directly to the point. Eliseo says that this is completely inappropriate for her. She didn't want to hesitate because she understood that it was time for her to declare her preferences. The boy calmly asks what exactly his wife means. He is totally and seriously interested in knowing if he could have done something wrong. Finally, she reveals that the underwear he gave her is too lewd for her. He looks at his wife in shock, not expecting to hear something like this. She says that she likes the most ordinary things, and in those underwear she looked absolutely terrible. And she also reports that she doesn't like toys. Eliseo admits that every time she puts it on, she immediately takes it off. Suddenly, the boy interrupts her monologue and confusingly asks her to slow down a bit. Maintaining a little intrigue, slowly and silently she gets up from the table. The indignant Duke asks what exactly the woman sitting opposite is talking about. Eliseo asks him to follow her so she can show him the same underwear. Lisa sees in front of him what he and his wife talked about during the meal. She informs him that this is not all and then hands him a strange box. The boy sees things in front of him that it is simply unacceptable to talk about out loud. The girl reports that, when she said she didn't like it, she meant that it was not to her liking at all. The Duke says that now it is much more interesting who thought of sending her something like this. He remembers that he forgot to tell his wife that this was a gift from the prince. The guy mentally almost curses His Highness for this act. Eliseo says that since they are married, she will keep it a secret. After hearing these words, her husband suddenly bursts out laughing. The girl is very upset by this reaction, but after a couple of seconds, the person opposite apologizes. He asks her if she is worried that her husband has such strange tastes. The Duke promises her that under no circumstances will he tell anyone about this. Then he laughs out loud again. And then he asks for forgiveness again. Once calm, Leza reports that there was a misunderstanding. The boy quickly tells her what really happened. She is very surprised when she finds out that these preferences belong to the prince. The Duke, smiling slightly, asks if they have dealt with this situation. The girl wonders why he didn't tell her from the beginning that the gift wasn't from him. He asks if his wife might have kept the gift because, after all, she liked it. She wonders if this is not true, and the boy reveals that he does not have the habit of intimidating people who are weaker than him. Eliseo finally makes sure that, after all, she did not lie to him. Suddenly, the Duke carefully places his wife's hair behind her ear. He, smiling slightly, politely asks the girl to trust him. The boy points out that before this, he had never met a girl. She is very surprised. She did not expect to find out such details about him. The girl asks him if he is really serious and not joking, to which she receives an affirmative answer. Suddenly, the Duke adds that he has something else to confess to her. Leza reports that he has slightly different preferences and prefers tenderness. Eliseo looks at him questioningly, not quite understanding what he is talking about. The boy says that there can be nothing sweeter than tenderness, because she is his first girlfriend. She doesn't quite understand why he constantly mentions that she is the first. Noticing her expression, the Duke asks her if everything is all right. The girl wonders if he is not a little embarrassed when he says something like that. Suddenly, a loud sound is heard nearby that attracts their attention. She quickly turns around, assuming it was just thunder. Suddenly, she sees fireworks outside the window, after which she immediately asks Les to look out the window. Suddenly, she remembers that the festival they had been warned about earlier was about to begin. The festival takes place for a week after the roses bloom. And on this day, male lovers pick the most luxurious ones and give them to their lovers. And then they dance together all night. The boy decided to ask her if his wife liked festivals. Eliseo says she would like these kinds of events, but she is not sure. Before this, she slept during the day and wrote at night, so she rarely left home. She relates that she likes festivals, but has never been to one dedicated to couples. Nor has she been to others. The girl also asks the person in front of her if he likes parties. Lessa says that he once even participated in several. He reports that this happened about 10 years ago, but basically, he spent absolutely all his time at home. All this time, he was busy with his affairs or reading some books. The girl suddenly realizes that this situation is very close to her. The boy offers to go out onto the balcony and watch the fireworks from there, to which he receives a positive answer. Upon going out, Eliseo notices that the view from there is much better than from inside. She, smiling sweetly, says that she really likes what is happening now. Suddenly, the Duke, a little embarrassed, decides to offer something to his wife. He asks her if she wants to go to the festival if she is not too tired yet. The girl is very surprised and then asks him if he wants this too. Leza says that he wouldn't mind and then asks for her opinion again. Eliseo happily accepts, feeling more and more motivated and enthusiastic. He tells her that it's time to get ready, then tells her to change and come down. Suddenly, the boy decides to change the subject, remembering something important. He takes the box from his wife and tells her that she should throw it away. The girl looks at him fearfully, not understanding how she can throw away a gift from the prince himself in the trash. She asks him to give her the box so she can hide it. Having finally taken the gift, she says that if they throw it in the trash so carelessly, they can get into trouble. He blushes deeply and then leaves, having previously said that he will wait for her downstairs. Eliseo is very surprised that the person leaving suddenly turned red. Meanwhile, she regrets not being so open to everything new. Having already changed, the girl slowly descends the stairs, apologizing for the wait. The boy gently takes her hand after asking permission. Already in the carriage, the girl asks those present to look out the window. She says that it is the first time she has gone out somewhere, so she is very worried. Chachu notes that they cannot know what danger is outside, so she asks them not to go too far. Eliseo asks the maid not to worry, as her husband will be by her side. Chachu says the girl is right, which makes her smile, after which they suddenly announce that the carriage has reached its destination. The girl runs a little ahead and asks her husband not to lag behind. The Duke asks her not to stray too far from him, because being alone can be dangerous. He says that due to the festival, a large crowd has gathered here and every merchant has decorated their stall. So if she likes something, she should tell him. Suddenly, she notices that incredibly beautiful jewelry is on display. She asks her husband to take a look and asks if it is really pretty. Lessa, smiling a little, says that this is quite good. Eliseo sadly asks him not to answer her so dryly anymore. The merchant, seeing the buyer in front of him, tells her that she has very good taste and that she chose a really beautiful necklace. She decides that it would be nice to buy earrings too, because the price is not very high. The man cheerfully reports that it will cost her 3 pieces of gold. The girl looks at her husband, feels sad because he doesn't consider the jewelry beautiful, and realizes that he is thinking about something of his own. She tells him that she was able to buy 2 whole pieces of jewelry, and that one of them was only half price. And she seems to be very good at haggling. He disinterestedly asks her to give him the necklace to try on. Eliseo suddenly runs to Chachu and tells her that she bought it for her. The maid is very surprised to hear something so unexpected. The Duchess reveals that she bought her a necklace and earrings that would suit her because of the purple color. The maid sighs in surprise, pleasantly surprised by such a sudden gift. Chachu sincerely thanks her, noticing the displeased less out of the corner of her eye. She says that she will gladly accept this gift and treasure it very much. Suddenly, the maid hears Dame rudely ask her if she took the gift. She calmly assumes that he is simply jealous, to which she receives a denial. Dame looks at the back of the knight, walking away in the distance. The boy feels someone looking at his back, sincerely hoping that his servant did not expect something like this from him. Suddenly, a loud sound is heard, and wonderful fireworks are launched. Cheerful Eliseo asks her husband to go together in the indicated direction, because all the young people should have gathered there. The two look at the sky, and the girl says that it is incredibly beautiful. She decides that she wants to tell her husband something important right now. Eliseo thanks him for his concern and for accompanying her. Accompanied, the boy kisses her hand and says that it is nothing special. Suddenly, he hears someone's voice and immediately decides to turn towards the sound. He sees a young couple kissing during the fireworks, not at all shy. The girl, also seeing this picture, remembers that the party was organized in honor of lovers. Looking at the strangers, they didn't notice how they were holding hands. The Duke himself did not understand how he came up with kissing her a little earlier. His wife was no less surprised by this act. She turned around very embarrassed because she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, a harsh, unfamiliar male voice is heard from somewhere in the distance. It was Count Male and another girl who looked as wicked as the one next to her. The smiling man looked crazily surprised at the couple in front of him. Lessa did not expect to run into anyone here, so she frowned. His wife, looking at him, thought it was simply incredible. The Count says he is delighted to meet them, and then apologizes for arriving so late. The man greets Eliseo and tells her it is an honor for him to meet her. He invites her to drink with him the wonderful wine he just bought. The girl understands that he came here for business and not just to relax. Suddenly, the Duke burst into the dialogue and said that he and his wife wanted to spend time together today, and that he did not want anyone interfering with their plans. The girl blushes slightly, feeling how close her husband is to her now. Male steps back, having no intention of arguing, and adds that he is very sorry. Lessa immediately realized that the Count did not like the fact that he was uninterested in this. The guy realized that he was looking for personal gain and perhaps needed to achieve the right to trade. In addition to this, the man would probably like to receive something from the Duke himself because he has always been like that. Male says he has to leave and hopes to see him soon. He looks at those in front of him one last time, smiling wickedly. Lazare decides that she needs to find out what this man is doing. Eliseo notices that her husband does not look very happy after this meeting. She apologizes for what happened and adds that she hopes the Count's appearance did not cause him any discomfort. The boy adds that before this it was very good, but everything was ruined for them. His wife says she should not apologize for it because they are still having fun. She asks if her statement is true and specifically asks Dame and Chachu. The servant is very surprised to realize that this was said in their direction. Chachu immediately confirms the lady's words, saying that everything is going very well. Dame also decides to agree and says that it has been a long time since she had as much fun as at this festival. Leza says she is very happy to hear something like that from them. He extends his hand to his wife and tells her that the vacation is coming to an end, so they should go back. Eliseo happily agrees with him, imagining how sweetly she will sleep. Back home, the Duke finally relaxes, taking a hot bath. He was very tired after visiting the festival today. And yet, thanks to this, he could see his wife so happy for the first time. This day exhausted him incredibly, taking away all the strength he had left. Despite this, he strongly remembered the way she repeated his name once and again. It seemed strange to him that in every encounter, he received a lot of new emotions. He couldn't even imagine what Eliseo would come up with tomorrow. The boy mentally wished good night to his wife, who was already asleep. In the morning, Dame enters the Duke's office, but does not see him there. She assumed he was simply exhausted after yesterday's walk with Eliseo, although he didn't look like it. Meanwhile, the guy walked determinedly down some hallway. Chachu meets him and asks how he slept last night. He says he slept enough and is surprised that she has been working since early morning. Just in case, he warns the maid that if anything happens, she was the one who took his wife to the room yesterday. That day, Eliseo accidentally fell asleep on the Duke's shoulder while traveling in a carriage. This made Les stay still and smile while looking at her. When the carriage arrived at the destination, Damie opened the door announcing their arrival. The boy slowly got out of there with his sleeping wife in his arms. They offered him help with this, but he refused without hesitation and decided to take care of this matter himself. The Duke told Adam that he had already worked hard today, so he could go rest. As a result, Leza himself carried his wife to his chambers and laid her on the bed. Then suddenly, he accidentally realized that she was sleeping almost like a frog. Seeing something like this, he involuntarily started to smile. Before leaving, he wished sweet dreams to his wife, who was already asleep. The Duke is looking seriously at Chachu. He expected her support in this matter. She was surprised by how much he cared about her, but she didn't want to embarrass him with that. Only now did she feel that the two of them were truly married. A little later, Eliseo jumps out of bed and asks how she could have fallen asleep in the carriage. She says she didn't want to wake up and blush with embarrassment, but the maid explains that she personally carried her to the room. The girl happily reports that she guessed it. Suddenly, Chachu says that Miss Lily sent her some kind of gift. Eliseo is very surprised when she hears her friend's name. Already sitting outdoors, she decides to open the gift she received. There she discovers some kind of book and a small letter from the sender. The letter said that many noble ladies were reading this book, and she hoped it would help her. The cheerful Eliseo decides that she can start reading right away. She understands that Lily still knows her preferences better than anyone. Suddenly, the girl notices the lines where the knight was very close to the marquise. After a while, sounds of passion filled her room. She quickly closes the book, thinking about how she can read such embarrassment. The girl really didn't understand how an obscene book could help her. She wondered why, and why Lily had sent such a book if she had just started leading a family life. Eliseo decides that the book needs to be hidden, and at the same time is glad that the cover of the book does not reflect its vicious content. Her eyes widen when she suddenly hears a familiar voice. She quickly turns around and sees her maid in front of her. Chachu brought her fresh strawberries because she thought she would like them. Suddenly, the newcomer realizes that her mistress is holding a book tightly. The maid hands her the papers, informing her that Lessa asked her to deliver them. Eliseo remembers that the Duke told her that she needed to get involved, but she couldn't stay away since she was his wife. Lessa and Dame entrusted some important matters to Chachu throughout the year. Different amounts of money are spent on different needs in the duchy. And when the seasons change, there are mandatory things that need attention. For example, at this time the garden was being prepared and the watercourses were being checked due to the rainy season. In the kitchen, a lot of attention is also paid to the products so that none of them spoil. Or almost. The girl tries one of the strawberries brought to her and notices that the fence is really very tasty. The maid realizes that the girl apparently loves books and then asks what she is reading now. Eliseo desperately tries to think of something on the fly, afraid to tell the truth. She says that this book is the most common gift. The girl states that this is absolutely not interesting. She also adds that she doesn't like these kinds of books at all. Suddenly, Chachu asks with interest what this work is about. The girl says it's just a book, like at school, and then she will definitely recommend something more interesting to her. She says that maybe the maid will like some of the things she likes. Chachu, smiling sweetly, joyfully thanks her duchess for this. Eliseo didn't understand at all how Chachu could be so great. She decides that in her next novel, she will definitely create a character in the image of her maid. Once in her room, the girl realizes that she will remember this book for the rest of her life. She puts her gift in a box, after which she realizes that this box always contains all sorts of obscenities. Lessa suddenly appears out of nowhere and asks her why she hasn't thrown the box away yet. The girl gets very scared. She obviously didn't expect to hear such a familiar voice behind her. She fearfully asks how he could have entered her room. The Duke informs her that the door to her room was wide open. He further adds that he did not forget to knock on the door before entering her room. Eliseo says she was just sorting books, and she herself thought that while moving some personal things here. She completely forgot about the open door. The Duke suddenly announces that next month he will travel to the Imperial Palace for dinner. He asks if his wife will join him and warns her that he would like to know the answer in advance. The boy says that this event will happen in exactly 2 weeks, and she realizes that she needs to prepare an outfit. The girl sincerely thanks him for warning her about this. Suddenly, she realizes that her husband is looking seriously at her room. Leza realizes that she has filled all the shelves with books he has never heard of. She was glad that she had taken care in advance to ensure that the shelves were spacious. Noticing the same box behind the girl, he asks if this is her treasure chest. Fearfully, she says that she is just putting her gifts there. Eliseo asks if she is hungry, and then suggests they go out for lunch. He says he is not hungry yet, but she quickly denies it. The girl asks him to trust her, and that now is the time for lunch. They leave together, leaving that box locked on the floor of her room. A little later, Eliseo sits quietly at her desk, doing her work. She wanted to sit down with the return of the night again, but it seemed she would have to postpone it because she had absolutely no idea how to write anything. The girl decides to follow the advice and start writing something simple and easy. She was very happy that she had some time left. Her new work was also about rebirth, but it had to be different from the previous novel. She was already thinking about some kind of light novel, so she had sketches. And the girl also planned for the work to be brief and easy to understand. Eliseo decides that she should remove the secondary characters. Soon the day turns into night, and the girl sits tiredly at the same table. As a result, she falls asleep and only wakes up in the morning, surprised that so much time has passed. At breakfast, she sits tiredly and doesn't understand what is happening. In front of her, as always, sits her husband with a calm expression on his face. She realizes that she is finally starting to get used to this life. In recent days, she has started having breakfast on a schedule, so she wakes up at a certain time. Elisha assumed it was because Sheldon was an amazing cook. The Duke suddenly remembers that his wife asked him to recommend a book. He suddenly asks her if she wants to read something about the relationship between two friends. He says that she seems to like these kinds of books very much. The girl, smiling slightly, says that he is indeed right. Suddenly, she asks him to forget about those very notes, feeling embarrassed. The boy takes a book from the shelf and hands it to his wife. She realizes that even though the title on the spine is not visible, the boy found the book without hesitation. Eliseo also notes that the book is very well preserved and does not have a single scratch on the cover. She tells him that he seems to be very careful with his books and believes she will like them. The girl promises to return the novel immediately after reading it. The Duke calmly tells her that she can take her time. Eliseo notices that he seems to be in a very good mood today. As a result, she collects a large pile of books, and the Duke says he will ask the servants for help. The girl says she can handle it and asks him to continue working. The Duke, slightly embarrassed, assigns himself and agrees with his wife. When the girl leaves, a small smile appears on his face. Meanwhile, Eliseo was very happy that her husband, who likes to read, could recommend books to her. After finishing work in the evening, she notices that her back hurts. The girl realizes that it is already 5 o'clock, and it seemed strange to her that she barely heard the servants walking. She was surprised that even today the dawn passed unnoticed. She had many notes piled up. As expected, the first drafts were written chaotically in the flow of her thoughts. But overall, everything turned out well. However, with this approach, she wasted a lot of paper due to constant corrections. About halfway through the story, she stopped completely. She remembers how the Duke looked surprised at his wife, who was lost in thought during breakfast. When the plot first occurred to her, she could barely contain herself due to the rush of emotions. Then she smiled often, which in fact could not help but please her husband. Although these were all approximate notes, it would be good to put them in order. The girl believes that the sheets of paper scattered here and there can hide the most beautiful treasures. And it was wonderful that her thoughts so easily turned into text. But the finished material will still be significantly different. And so a new world, a new story, and then a book is born, and once the books, which were printed in limited editions, included metal plates with her initials engraved on the covers. The print runs sold out so quickly that she didn't even have time to buy a copy for herself. Publishing such a book takes a long time, and a limited edition always takes longer due to the design. And it is more expensive. With the money she raised, or was able to help many children among these books, was The Return of the Night, whose copies sold out like hotcakes. Eliseo remembers that she will soon have to go to breakfast with her husband, and then she can go to bed. Suddenly, she decides that maybe they should have breakfast separately, because the fact that he is forced to eat with her makes her a little uncomfortable. She decides to read the books Lessa recommended until breakfast time. The girl happily takes out one of the books with the intention of seeing what they recommended to her. She realizes that the cover of the book is in good condition and seems to have been read a couple of times. But no cover guarantees that the pages are in good condition. The girl has long noticed that they treat things with care, and this gives her the most pleasant sensations. Eliseo suggests that if he cares so much about the book, then maybe it is very valuable. Upon opening the book, she suddenly notices something very strange and surprising. The writing style used in the book was exasperatingly familiar to her. She decides that this is just a common dream and nothing more. In front of her was one of her limited edition books that she couldn't buy. She definitely wrote the preface, as she practiced based on popular books. Then she was so embarrassed by the first volume that she never sat down to read this story again. Suddenly, she realizes that it was a limited edition metal record that hasn't even been released yet. Moreover, the number 1 on the cover indicated that this was the first circulating book. Just in case, the girl checks that it is Phil and not Foul or Full. Convinced that this was her nickname, her eyes sparkled. She decided to look at the other books the Duke recommended to her. The girl carefully scans every written line. She gasps when she realizes that this is also her book. She was still embarrassed by the sentence in which she thanked the readers for coming to meet her. This was the same manuscript she decided not to publish because it was no longer relevant. Eliseo realizes that all the books the boy recommended to her were written by her. She didn't understand how he could have absolutely everything she wrote. She was also interested to know why her husband advised her to do this. She also remembered that he constantly asks her about The Return of the Night. The girl understands that Les not only liked these books. He liked the author Phil himself, as well as his writing style. In fact, her husband had been her most devoted reader all along. She mentally asks to wait a little longer for Les, and will release another piece. Walking down the hallway, she sees her husband in front of her, wishing her good morning. She gets a little scared when she sees him, after which she feels some discomfort. Breakfast time begins, and they sit at the table opposite each other. The girl, without taking her eyes off him, stares intently at the man sitting opposite her. The boy doesn't notice, and calmly starts eating the prepared food. Suddenly, he accidentally realizes that his wife is looking at him terribly. He asks her if she has insomnia, or if she simply didn't get enough sleep. Eliseo says that his assumptions are wrong, and that she slept enough. He asks her if she likes the food, and warns her that she can ask for a replacement. The girl says that all the food on the table is very tasty. While putting a lemon in her mouth, she realizes that today's meat is simply delicious. The Duke assumes she is sick, and then says he must call a doctor. She says everything is fine, but the boy tells her that she has some taste. She tries to say that the meat was very tasty, but suddenly realizes that it was lemon. Lisa reports that it seems he will have to call a doctor after all. A little later, while heading to his office for business, he suddenly realizes that his wife has been following him this whole time. He says he is going to his office, and then asks her if she wants to talk about something. She really wanted to know how he got the limited edition of her book, and why she liked these novels so much. She says out loud that nothing happened, and then praises him for working even on holidays. There is an awkward pause, and the Duke tries to think what to say. He says that everything is fine. She can calmly say whatever we want. The girl denies having followed him for any reason, but Leza insists that she come closer. Eliseo, embarrassed, begins to try to compose the correct continuation. Her husband tells her that he is willing to listen to absolutely everything from her, and that she should not be ashamed to tell him. It was the first time he had seen her like this, so he assumed something had happened. Suddenly, he assumes that the girl has ruined one of his precious books. The boy understands that this, even if small, is still a problem for him. He decides that it will be much better if she admits everything herself, after which he will try to get over it. The girl, stuttering a lot, tries to find an excuse for her strange behavior. Suddenly, she wonders if she can shake hands with the person in front of her. The boy is surprised that his wife is asking her husband for a handshake. He didn't understand at all what was happening, nor how to react to it. He was incredibly annoyed by the strange way the girl was smiling now. Suddenly, Eliseo says that a handshake can be replaced by something else. She happily offers him a hug, withdrawing her outstretched hand. The Duke understands that they have never done this, so he didn't know why she was asking him about it now. He decides that maybe she is sick after all, and then it could be dangerous. Suddenly, Elisha remembers that the boy has no idea that she is Phil and cannot even admit it. She didn't understand if she could let slip what she had said recently. Lessa strokes his wife's forehead, checking for a fever. She quickly tells him that she is indeed completely healthy. She was sad that she couldn't reveal who she was to him and didn't have the opportunity to thank him in any way. The girl desperately wanted to at least give him an autograph from Phil himself. Unfortunately, they didn't know each other too well yet, so she didn't dare reveal her identity. She had been writing for a long time, but she didn't understand how she managed to meet her own avid reader. This was the first time something like this had happened to her, and she had never thought about it before. She didn't care, even if no one recognized her work anymore. She tells the boy that she has no special reason and is simply in a good mood. The Duke looks at her and realizes that apparently something good really happened. He finally calms down and offers to shake her hand. Having expressed his tempting offer, this time he is the first to extend his palm to her. They hold hands and both think that their palms are very warm. Eliseo decides not to stop and offer him a hug in addition to this. The boy begins to wonder what is really going on in that cute little head. Meanwhile, Dame walks sadly down the hallway, feeling it unfair to have a weekend off. But she ends up doing laundry. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to something very strange to him. The servant sees his master and his wife hugging in front of him. The boy looks shocked as they stand and hug in broad daylight. Suddenly, someone's strong hand quickly pulls him aside somewhere around the corner. Chachu, who caught him, says that one cannot be so tactless. She asks him if he thinks the Duke would really like him to stand there watching them. Dame reports that he was simply so surprised that he couldn't move. She says that she herself is very surprised, but he doesn't pay attention because his master is married. So now this is the order of things. The boy wonders if she understands everything that just happened. The girl asks him to stop and go together to complete the preparations for the rainy season. They leave, and meanwhile the Duke and his wife have finished hugging. Lisa asks if this is enough, to which she receives an affirmative answer. The girl says that he probably has a lot of work, and then apologizes. Then she asks her husband not to work too hard. Suddenly, she takes out a handkerchief and tells him to accept it as a gift. The Duke looks at her surprised, not expecting to receive such a gift. At that moment, he was very confused, but still accepted her gift. Holding the handkerchief in his hands, he thought that he had no idea what was happening now. Eliseo, almost radiant, says goodbye to him and retreats to her room. A little later, Dam informs the boy that information about illegal drugs in the capital has been confirmed. The person sitting, a little gloomy, wonders how many there are approximately. The servant says that according to his information, there are not many, but it turned out that Count Mail was involved in this. According to him, this is not the only thing that intrigues the person sitting opposite. Dam reports that they discovered something in one of the ponds. It was the body of a young man showing signs of torture. Leza becomes even sadder when he hears that this was done to a child. He wonders how long ago this body was discovered in the pond. The servant reports that it was found early this morning and there were no witnesses. There were few people nearby so early, so they quickly resolve the matter. The Duke's gaze turns downward, and he thinks about something of his own. He couldn't believe what had happened, because they had recently reinforced security. Accidents were perfectly acceptable, but at that moment, we were talking about killing a child. The guy asks the person opposite to first look for people and reinforce the perimeter security. After which he hands him a letter and asks him to deliver it today. Dame asks him if he thinks this is related to smuggling. The Duke reports that this is very possible and that the situation will be clarified once the investigators finish their work, which will be very difficult because they have no evidence. He understands that, most likely this time, they will need the help of the council. Leza tells his subordinate that he can continue with his business. Suddenly, he sees Chachu and his wife talking about something outside the window. Eliseo was almost shining with happiness, which was quite noticeable. The Duke understands that he still didn't lie about being in a good mood. He smells the gifted scarf and wonders why he decided to give it to her. This image is accidentally noticed by Dame, who has not yet left. The servant asks his master for permission to ask him a question before leaving. Leza coldly says that he should leave now. The servant wonders why he liked the girl so much, suggesting it was because of her appearance. He, becoming increasingly aggressive, orders the speaker to leave. Dame diligently continues to ask him questions, not holding back. Suddenly angry shouts are heard, and the office is instantly empty. The woman standing in front of the Duchess introduces herself as Madame Andre. Eliseo assumes that she decided to bring her entire shop here when she sees so many things in front of her. She knew that noble ladies often buy expensive clothes and only wear them 2 or 3 times. The woman tells her that it is an honor to have the dress made for her and that they will try to find a design that suits her tastes. She understood that the more the Duchess ordered, the more people would talk about them. Andre asks what about the design she suggested. Later, she reports that they will produce the design within the promised timeframe. Finally, Chachu and Eliseo are alone, after which they realize that they are finished. The maid cheerfully offers her a glass of freshly squeezed juice. The girl happily accepts, having first asked if this would make it difficult for her. She only checked a couple of design options and didn't talk much, but even that exhausted her. She really wanted every day to be just as peaceful. Looking slightly up, she suddenly remembers something really important. Eliseo carefully takes a book from the shelf and decides that she still needs to review some of the ones she borrowed. She should have gone to bed after that, but she had a couple more things to do. She needed to evaluate donations and her fees, as well as assets, investments, and tickets she had in the bank. For the wedding to go smoothly, she needed to put everything in order. But she started doing it too late. The girl decides that she should go to the bank the next day. At the same time, she also plans to go to the shelter, as it has been a long time since she was there. This morning, sitting at lunch with her husband, she says she wants to go to the bank and stop by the shelter she has long sponsored. The boy had almost no objections, but he had a small problem. He asked to send a few more escorts with her than usual. The girl asks excitedly if something serious happened. Suddenly, the person sitting opposite reports that a murder has occurred and that the body of a child has been found. He says that he has already reinforced security, but caution is still needed. His wife asks worriedly if they have found the person who committed the crime. The boy says that the investigation is ongoing, so it is worth taking precautions. Although he understands that she doesn't like it. She promises not to stay up late and then says she hopes they catch the criminal quickly. Already in the carriage, she understands that it is quite difficult to write until dawn, and then decide on personal matters in the morning. And yet today she travels with Chachu and an escort, so her soul is calmer. Once they arrive at their destination and she gets out of the carriage, Lily greets her. The girl happily notices that they haven't seen each other for quite some time. They hug. And the younger one notices that she misses her a lot. Chachu is surprised that some maid allows herself to hug her mistress. The Duchess asks if the girl brought what she asked for. Lily gives a positive answer and says that now she can go to the bank safely. Eliseo thanks her and tells her that she will do it right away. One of the escorts offers his help to the girl, to which she calmly agrees. Lily asks someone nearby with interest if she works for Elisha. Chachu happily notes that this is exactly how everything is, and her guess turned out to be correct. The youngest had no idea how a simple maid could be so tall and beautiful. She suddenly wonders if she knows that the lady is a very good person. She agrees and then shows the gift Eliseo gave her. Lily, seeing this, realizes that she is very jealous of this maid. The Duchess suddenly returns and then thanks her friend for her help. The younger one suddenly says that she can ask her whenever she wants and for anything. She was very happy that her friend had such a wonderful assistant, but she didn't understand why she was so sad deep down. When the carriage finally arrives at the orphanage, Eliseo says that the knights should stay outside because they might scare the children. She says that everything will be fine because Chachu will be with her and she will try not to linger. One of the escorts says that they will be waiting for them at the entrance. Sister Gabriella meets them outside the door and at the same time thanks her for visiting. The girl asks how the children are and finds out that thanks to her donations, everything is very well. And they have enough. Gabriella also doesn't forget to congratulate the person opposite on her wedding. Eliseo sponsors this orphanage to maintain her family's authority. Luckily, that wasn't the only reason she came here. Suddenly, Fatima, happy about her arrival, quickly runs down the stairs. They hug tightly, and the girl says that she missed her too. Her second reason was that she comes here to meet the children. The girl assumes that the younger one has bruised knees again because she runs at a dizzying speed. The girl says she ran only because she missed her so much. Eliseo asks her maid to bring a bottle from her purse, remembering something. She gives the child some sweets and promises to share them with her friends. Fatima joyfully thanks the person opposite for the sweets she brought. She also thanks Chachu when she finds out that she prepared them with her own hands. The girl runs away, and the Duchess talks to her escort about how incredibly sincere Fatima was. Approaching Gabriella, the girl asks her if there is any news about Fatima's custody. The sister sadly reports that few people want to take in a girl with such a scar on her face. She adds that the girl is her young assistant, takes care of the little ones, and if she doesn't find good people, she will continue to take care of her. Eliseo tells her sister to accept the box with a huge amount because she has a great responsibility. She had just withdrawn this money from the bank and wanted to donate it to the orphanage. The sister says that Marquis Weber has already sacrificed a lot this spring. Eliseo says that her husband also wants to help the children, so they made this decision together. And she asks her to accept the money. The sister expresses her great gratitude and says that she will pray to the Almighty for her. And the Duke. The girl realizes that Fatima left without Alex and asks if he was adopted. Previously, Alex took care of Fatima as if she were his own sister. Gabriella says that Alex is far from being adopted. Eliseo enthusiastically wonders what happened to the child. The sister offers to go inside and says she will tell her about Alex there. One of the noble families adopted Alex, and his property was 200 miles away. But the child's body was recently found in the canals, not far from the capital's borders. She hadn't told Fatima this, and since it was the first time the Duchess had visited them in a long time, she regretted having to deliver such terrible news to them. The sister said that she should not apologize, hoping that Alex had gone to a better place. The girl couldn't even imagine that what her husband told her in the morning had happened to Alex. She had no idea how something like this could happen to such a bright child. Chachu looked worriedly at her incredibly depressed mistress. During dinner, Eliseo says she would like to know something about the murder the guy told her about this morning. Lessa, a little cautiously, says that the girl can ask anything. She says that today she was at the orphanage that her family sponsors, and they told her that the child who was murdered was one of the orphanage children who had been recently adopted. The Duke looks at his wife in shock, not expecting to hear something like that at all. She says that lately noble families have been taking more and more children from orphanages, and several have already been taken from her orphanage. The girl reports that she is very worried that the children might be in danger. Thoughtfully, Leslie observes that what is happening is terribly awful. He admits that the funding for orphanages is not the best, which makes it difficult to track the children they place in families. Eliseo says that's why she would like to ask him to help her with this. She directly says that now she wants to know the addresses of those who were adopted and find out if they need help. The boy has no objections and asks her to let him know when things are clarified. She thanks him for his help and tells him that she knows he is already very busy. The girl wonders if the adoption procedure should be made stricter and adds that such cases cannot be allowed to happen again. She says that in other countries, the process is much stricter and there are many interviews. Eliseo begins to give examples, completely obsessed with this topic. The Duke couldn't even imagine that they would discuss these topics together. He says that this is a great idea and that he will study it carefully. The girl thanks him very much for his help and for listening to her. She had never suspected before that this marriage could be useful to her in her work. In the evening, the maid reports that the Duchess was very affected by this incident, because she is apparently very close to those children. The boy thinks about how much he cares about the students. He sinks a little into his thoughts, recalling today's events. During the meal, he accidentally recognized the girl next to him from his new acquaintance. At the same time, Eliseo realizes that, excluding the expense on donations, her assets in the bank have significantly increased. Rejoicing, she decides that with that money she can buy books for the children. She was going to donate absolutely all her earnings to that shelter again. Suddenly, she remembers that she almost managed to get a donation from the publishing house. Sarah told her not to worry because people tend to do good things. Suddenly, she wonders if she should write her a short letter. After finishing writing it, she decides to ask the maid to send it to Sarah. The girl understands that if the publishing house suddenly helps her, it will be great. Having finally received some kind of response from Phil, the boy is surprised that he was rejected. Dame reports that the writer no longer needs any sponsors. The servant hands him the papers and tells him that there are investment reports and a letter written by Phil himself. The Duke is very surprised to realize that he wrote him a letter. On paper, the writer thanked him for reading and appreciating the return of the night series, and also for trying to support the author in some way. The boy could feel every word, even if it was just ink on paper. He understood that even though Phil didn't know who he was, he still felt uncomfortable. Although the publishing house did not accept the money, the Duke was still happy. Suddenly, Chachu tells her mistress that she wants to help her and be useful. The Duke says he will not, and since Phil refuses, he can no longer bother him. And yet, he was very sorry that he could not help his favorite author. Suddenly, Chachu tells her mistress that she wants to help her and be useful. The girl, taking him outdoors, asks what she means. The maid asks her to let her know in advance when she will visit the orphanage, so that Chachu can prepare something for the children. She says she will only do it if it's not too difficult. The maid says she will be happy to do this and prepare something delicious. The Duchess says that in that case she trusts her, which makes the second one smile. Chachu leaves, saying that she will bring more refreshments. The girl understands that if she hadn't gone to the shelter yesterday, she wouldn't have found out the sad news about Alex. However, she was glad that the child's funeral was held with all honors. All thanks to Les. And yet, it was not clear why some kind of drug was found in Alex's hands. While studying the murder case, the Duke discovers that the child was bought for a minimal amount to abuse him and force him to work. All this was too cruel for a completely healthy person. He couldn't tell Eliseo all the details because it would surprise her. The aristocrat who adopted Alex was imprisoned, but during the process, he cut off his tongue. So they couldn't get the information they needed. This case was not that simple, because the murder was not the only thing they were trying to hide. He understood that it was necessary to investigate this case as thoroughly as possible. Several days pass and the boy, passing by his wife's room, suddenly notices something. For some reason, the Duchess and her maid were trying to dance something together. The girl, smiling, notices that Chachu dances incredibly well. The second, a little embarrassed, asks her not to exaggerate too much with compliments. Leza enters the room and immediately asks what they are doing here. The girl reports that she is practicing dancing, after which she apologizes for the inconvenience. She says she has never danced in pairs, and the Duke comments that she is doing a great job. The maid, watching these two, suddenly has a brilliant idea. She asks for forgiveness and says that she needs to finish a job urgently. Eliseo apologizes and realizes that, thanks to her, Chachu will have to work late. Before leaving, she decides to make a small request to her master. She asks with interest not to be left in suspense and to tell her everything clearly. The maid invites him to practice dancing with Eliseo. He, gloomy, looks at her seriously, not understanding what other dances we are talking about now. But the boy couldn't take his eyes off his wife's eyes, seeing how much she wanted to dance. With a sigh of resignation, he agrees, unable to refuse her. He looks away, supposedly visually following the maid to the door. The Duke extends his hand, suggesting that they begin practicing the dance. She warns him that she might accidentally step on his foot, to which he tells her that everything will be fine. The girl extends her palm in response and agrees to get to work. He gently puts his arm around her waist, and Eliseo says they shouldn't dance so close because she might trip. The Duke calmly says that there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Suddenly, she asks why they don't move to the first floor, since it's more convenient there. The girl worriedly says there are too many servants there, and she is shy. He asks what if he simply tells everyone to leave. She refuses and says she is also comfortable here, so they should continue. Eliseo says that if he smiles, she will feel much better. Hearing these words, the boy blushes a little, to which she simply smiles. She asks him if he thinks she has improved at dancing. The Duke realizes that she didn't even step on his foot. The girl says she didn't even pay attention to him. Suddenly, she realizes she is invaded by a strange feeling. Suddenly, she asks him where he learned to dance like that, if he doesn't attend parties. Smiling, the boy says he just learned to dance with her. She feels very embarrassed hearing these words, which makes her blush visibly. The Duke, not paying much attention to this, suggests continuing. The day of the visit to the imperial palace arrives, and the girl opens one of the gifts, in which she sees a beautiful outfit. Some time later, Leza, while waiting for his wife, hears footsteps not far from her. This was Eliseo, dressed in that beautiful outfit that would be hard to look away from. The Duke cheerfully comments that she looks simply incredible. She thanks him for the gift and apologizes for not being able to try it on immediately. The boy says there is nothing wrong and everything is quite fine. He asks her if she is ready to go to the palace, to which he receives a positive answer. The Duke abruptly asks if she is nervous, and she replies that she is not. Suddenly, she wonders how often he attends such events. Thinking, Leza says that he probably only visited a couple. She assumes that he only goes to those banquets where the emperor himself is present. The girl suddenly wonders why her face is so bitter. Hearing this to satisfy his wife's wish, he smiles slightly. Once at the location, he says the banquet will start a little later in the evening. Opening the door to one of the rooms, he says she can rest here for now. After a couple of minutes, the boy offers to have tea on the terrace, to which she happily agrees. Suddenly, a small knock is heard at the door, and Dam enters the room. He whispers something in his master's ear, quietly, so the girl doesn't hear. The Duke suddenly changes his expression, very surprised by what he hears. He says he needs to leave urgently, and then asks her to stay in the room. The boy says that Chachu will come very soon and help her with the luggage. The girl is very upset, realizing they won't be able to have tea together. She also hoped they could practice their dance a little more. Sitting at the table and holding a glass, she mentally repeats all the movements and details. The girl realizes she has almost forgotten everything, which saddens her. A small knock is heard at the door again, and the maid says she will go check who has come. She remembers that tomorrow morning the men will go hunting, and the girl will see a play and have tea. Then in the afternoon there will be a masquerade ball, and on the last day there will be another banquet and a charity event somewhere. Suddenly, Chachu, worried, approaches her, and the Duchess realizes that someone important has arrived. It turns out that to her great surprise, it was the crown prince himself. She looks at him in shock, not understanding what he is doing here. The prince cheerfully says he was looking forward to the moment they could meet. She apologizes for not coming to greet him herself. The girl says she is happy to meet you, remembering the gift he recently gave them. He asks what the point of manners is, because everyone here is his, after which Lessa enters the room. The prince says he only came to greet, after which he invites him to sit down and chat. He warns in advance that he is a charmer compared to some in this room, clearly pointing at the Duke. Already at the table, he says that Marquis Weber once spoke of his only and beloved daughter. So he is glad that they met in person. Suddenly he asks if they liked his wedding gift. The girl, laughing artificially, thanks him for what he sent them then. Having become gloomy, the Duke says that this was incredibly tactless. Bluntly. Suddenly, His Highness realizes that he almost forgot something. He asks them if they like their rooms and points out that it is far from the banquet hall. But it is the largest and most luxurious room of all. The guy says it is well soundproofed and then says he hopes they like it here. The girl's opinion of him changes a little and she decides he is not so bad, after which she thanks him for the room. Happily, she wonders if she can ask a question, since everything suits them. The prince says that he himself often rests in this room, and thanks to it, he has a turn. So he asks Les to please him with the same news. The Duke sighs, clearly expecting something like this, and his wife looks at the man in shock. Suddenly, she realizes what he meant and blushes deeply. The prince leaves saying he hopes to see them at the long-awaited banquet. Eliseo looks at him with disdain, digesting all the information she recently heard. After standing for about a minute in awkward silence, the girl says she should change her shoes. He says that in that case, he will go out for a while, and his wife reports that it would be really great. The time for the reception arrives, and they immediately approach the hall. She reports that the place is incredibly luxurious, and she is a little nervous. The girl confusingly notes that she needed to work more on her dancing. The Duke suddenly realizes that it is better if they don't dance at all. She says she wants this because it is the first time they go out together as a couple. Eliseo says they must show their best side. The boy smilingly says he absolutely agrees with this. They enter the hall together, which attracts the attention of everyone present. A polite man greets Mr. Armand standing before the day. Gradually, a crowd begins to approach them, congratulating them on their wedding. The girl joyfully thanks those present for their congratulations and gifts. The atmosphere seemed quite pleasant because everyone welcomed her very warmly. The prince, addressing his guests, invites them to drink, eat, and have fun. Leza and his wife are facing each other, preparing for the long-awaited dance. Meanwhile, a redhead named Chiron is sitting in a room with his wife. The girl suddenly wonders why he is not participating in the celebration. The boy disinterestedly asks why he needs this. He could have gone, but he didn't care about the fun at all. When the banquet ends, the tired Duke and Eliseo head to their room. The girl realizes that today was a very long day and tomorrow will be the same, so she was very eager to go to bed as quickly as possible. Her face suddenly changes when she realizes there is only one bed in their room. Realizing this, Leza asks her not to worry, telling her that there is another bedroom there. The girl says this is a great relief for her and that they have prepared a really nice room. Already lying in bed, she noticed how comfortable her friend's bed was and her soft blanket. But she still couldn't sleep because she was nervous. When the next day came, the men went out hunting as planned. At the same time, the women were supposed to watch the performance and then go for tea. The girl sitting at the same table with Eliseo suggests that she liked the tea party more than the ball. This was the wife of Count Dmitri, with whom they became good friends. The Duchess agrees, thinking that they were able to become friends because they were the same age. They discuss the fact that they could go for tea with the Count's wife. Eliseo says that through meetings, you can learn a lot about yourself. The woman sitting opposite agrees with her and says that this is very possible. Unlike other aristocrats, the Countess did not try to teach her anything. Suddenly, for some reason, Count Hermann's wife approaches their table. Eliseo greets her and the approaching woman is surprised that they remember her. The Duchess remembered how she looked at her and whispered with others. Then the girls who dominate the capital's society gathered at the table. Today neither the princess nor the empress was with them. But there were always cunning, high society foxes looking to take their place. The countess realizes that Duke Armand seems to care a lot about her. She says that, given her beauty, this is not surprising. The girl asks the Duchess to come see them more often, because they will always be happy to see her. Eliseo hesitantly thanks her for such an unexpected invitation. The Countess says she will look forward to it and then wishes her a good time. Finally she leaves, leaving the Duchess and Dimitri's wife alone. Eliseo was very worried during this conversation, but fortunately she came with good intentions. She understood that to everyone she seemed like a newcomer to the world of married women. But in any case, she had to make sure that this communication was an advantage for her. The girl exhales in relief, realizing that dialogue is over. On the third day, there was a charity fair organized by the nobles. The girl was happy to have managed to collect a lot of money, which went to a good cause. She understood that in a couple of days, she could finally return home. Lessa was also having a good time, but for some reason still felt uncomfortable. 2 days pass, and the girl slowly gets up, waking up. As a result, she spent these 2 days only in bed, doing nothing else. She was supposed to publish a new work, but she didn't even dare to pick up a pen. Now she could no longer postpone anything. The girl suddenly realizes that today she managed to write with great ease. It seems that the long-awaited inspiration has finally visited her. She takes The Return of the Night from the shelf, which she hasn't picked up in a long time. She wondered if she would be able to write a sequel. After a while, she looks confusedly at the page on which she had been writing something all this time. The girl suddenly realizes that she cannot stay there. She had already thought about the ending of the book, but now nothing works because she cannot finish writing it. She wanted to publish the final volume of The Return of the Night as soon as possible to see her husband reading it. Suddenly, she hears a soft knock at the door and realizes that Chachu is already here. The maid cheerfully reports that the Duke has finally arrived after the house. She doesn't have time to finish when suddenly the girl leaves. Lycio sincerely thanks him and then runs quickly to the hallway. The maid shouts at her to at least comb her hair for decency. She turns around, but there seems to be no trace of her lover. The girl happily runs to her husband, already seeing his silhouette in the distance. She shouts his name, and he immediately turns around and hears a familiar voice. Finally approaching him, she asks if he has returned home and if he will leave soon. The boy smiles, slightly seeing his disheveled wife in front of him. He says he just arrived, and she takes his hand. Eliseo was glad that now they could spend time together, see each other at dinner, and wish each other good morning. She asks him with interest if he has eaten, after which she informs him that she has not had dinner yet. The Duke suddenly raises his hand and gently strokes her head. He realizes that her hair is incredibly soft and then gets a little lost in thought. The girl touches her hair confusedly, not understanding what just happened. Embarrassed, the Duke invites her to have dinner together again. She happily says that she will go change clothes then, and they will meet in the dining room. She runs away, and the Duke, remembering what he did before, wonders why he did it. At the same time, Charon walks slowly through a gloomy dungeon. He started to get angry, and his head began to hurt more and more when he heard the noise around him. Suddenly, a man approaches the boy and realizes that he hasn't been here in a long time. It was Count Mael, cunningly addressing his own master. The man reports that the imperial family has been very busy these days, and everyone is very unhappy about it. He says he would like to share his power with the boy, but he refuses. The Count asks if he knows how many nobles understand the inferiors and share their feelings. Chiron, uninterested in what the subordinate said, asks if everything is ready. Not wanting to disappoint the master, Mael says all that needs to be done is to give his order. One of his subordinates brings His Majesty a drink, and he begins to drink. The Count was enraged by the fact that Chiron was an incompetent guy and narcissistic. But despite this, it was easier to work with him than with Less or Abel. The man reports that he was bored these days, so he came up with entertaining his master. He says that now he will be able to see everything himself, which interests the boy a little. Suddenly, exhausted young men sitting in cages become visible. Gradually, they are forced out of their confinement and take refuge in an enclosed area. Charon knew that slavery was forbidden by law, so he suggested that they were his debtors. The count announces that he wants to start the show, and one of his subordinates starts the show. Terrible dark animals suddenly enter the arena, and their eyes light up intensely when they see their prey. After this, a loud scream is suddenly heard, and everyone watching falls silent. Male immediately smiles, completely satisfied with the work done. Chiron suddenly says that he was not interested in the show at all. He reports that due to the entertainment in this case, the only thing left is to get drunk. The man asks what about that offer to give him powers. The younger one irritably asks what exactly he is trying to achieve. Male says that he will not understand it until he experiences it himself, and that the result can be achieved gradually. He says he will think about it, although he didn't like it at all. Cheerful Sarah says she really missed her friend. The Duchess smilingly affirms that this feeling is very mutual. Soon they enter the building and sit down at the table. And the girl says she is not in the mood, which makes Sarah think she is bored of her. In fact, this was not the case, and for the girl it was much more boring to stay at home. Sarah says she looks quite blooming, and then asks if the Duke still knows that she is Phil. The Duchess affirms that she has decided not to burden him with this for now. She suggests that her manager is very upset because he cannot even email her. The woman sitting opposite says that this is so, but since they started talking about it, she advises her not to strain herself, because it is very important to write a quality book. The girl suddenly pulls out some papers and asks her to look at them, saying that something has changed since the last conversation. She also wonders if this manuscript can be considered complete. Sarah starts reading her notes while the Duchess waits patiently. Upon finishing reading, the girl's face changes a little, which scares Eliseo. She speculated that she might have written the villain wrong, or maybe she had a plot hole. Without waiting any longer, she jumps up and asks how strange her piece turned out. Sarah says that everything is great and it turned out very interesting. The girl realizes that something is still wrong, suggesting that it might be because she did not include global problems in the plot. Her friend finally decides to say what is wrong. The Duchess impatiently asks her to tell her everything calmly as it is. Sarah reports that her writing style has changed dramatically. Eliseo says she didn't think it would be so noticeable. She suggests that this may be related to a new plot. The director adds that the manuscript turned out quite interesting. She says that her work up to that point had been radical, like The Return of the Night. The girl realizes that her new novel, The Curious Witch, turned out quite bland. Suddenly, she wonders if Eliseo thought of all this in the first place. The Duchess reports that this time, the book fell short compared to others. So she decided to try something new. She says that the main thing is that the book sells well and hopes that in the future the work will be even more popular than the others. The girl also adds that such a decision could play against her. Suddenly, she realizes that apparently Sarah is more worried about these changes than she is. Eliseo realizes that if she continues to experiment with her writing, she might accidentally reveal her identity. Regarding the text, Sarah says it turned out well. Both her usual handwriting and something new can be felt. And besides, as always, she raised a very delicate topic. The Duchess joyfully thanks the person sitting opposite for the compliments she just received. She says that she was actually worried because she feared that she wouldn't like it. Sarah points out that this cannot be true and then decides to say something else. She reports that it seems the girl described something personal in the novel. This was evident because at the end of the book, unexpectedly, she decided to improve the relationships between the characters. She says that if she still finds it difficult to express her feelings, then she should focus on describing the facts that are happening, or analyze the plot further. Eliseo reports that then she will not be able to meet the deadline, and, in her opinion, it is necessary to publish this novel. and the last chapters of The Return of the Night at the same time. She sadly says that she thinks Return of the Night has taken too long. In fact, she was desperate to show the last chapters to her husband. Sarah says that apparently she is really experiencing something new, and then remembers that she got married recently. The girl invites her to write about her own experience in her book. The Duchess looks at her surprised and asks what she is talking about. The woman sitting opposite asks what could be much better than this. Sarah adds that novel sales have increased a lot lately, so they need to work even harder. She says that a noblewoman said she wanted to get closer to people and that she would write a novel about it. So she is doing her best to write something. The Duchess happily notes that she seems to like it a lot. Sarah says she is still not sure about the girl's manuscripts, so she would like the person in front of her to take a look at them. She reminds her that she is the author of The Return of the Night, so this grants her a special status. She also adds that this novel seems to have the power to change the world. A little later, the Duchess walks in the garden, remembering how she talked with her patrons today. And they were much more interested than she had imagined, only now she really wanted to change the plot. So she had no idea what to do. No matter how much she wrote, she didn't like anything, although in the process of creating the story it seemed to her that everything was perfect. Perfect! She decides that she should read something to distract herself. For her, literature was wonderful because when she reads another book, she can suddenly learn something for herself. But today, she thought about the content of Return of the Night much more than usual. She was reading a book, and at the same time, she was writing down her new ideas on a piece of paper. Suddenly, Lessa appears from somewhere and asks his wife what she is doing. The girl is startled by such an unexpected appearance, after which she asks how long it has been since he returned. Suddenly, the man realizes that his wife is diligently writing something. Eliseo is even more frightened, realizing that all the notes about the Return of the Night are written there. Although it is a draft, the boy can still understand what is written there. Because he loves the Return of the Night, he finds it difficult to realize that they can be exposed so stupidly. Now was the right time to tell the truth, and he supposed that he would understand since he was reading it. Deciding to tell the truth, the girl says she must confess something to him. Suddenly, the Duke reveals that he knows she likes to read, but he doesn't suspect that she also writes. Eliseo realizes that he didn't understand that these are sketches for the Return of the Night. She says that she is actually trying to write something of her own because it has become fashionable among the nobility lately. The boy reports that Phil once said that she started with small pieces, so it's okay to start small. The girl agrees with him, mentally thinking that she is Phil. The Duke happily says that someday he will find her book in a store and maybe even open his own publishing house. She says she will never show him the sketches, and he realizes that he is very cruel to his first and most grateful reader. The girl asks him to leave, while he sadly talks about only wanting to support his wife. The uniformed man tells the Duke that they haven't seen each other in a long time. This man was Eliseo's beloved older brother named Elliot. Suddenly, the brother decides to ask the man in front of him about Eliseo. He felt unusually awkward talking about his sister as a duchess. Understanding what he is trying to say, Leza reports that the girl is fine. He asks him to visit, assuming that this will make Eliseo very happy. Elliot had no idea that the Duke could be so kind. Lessa says that if he has no urgent news, then they should continue their conversation later. Because now he should return. The boy decides that maybe he got carried away a little by him. The girl sits thoughtfully at the table, not understanding why everything is happening this way. She understands that if nothing changes, they will have to postpone the book's publication date. She decides that she should relax somehow by getting a bottle of alcohol. Suddenly, the Duke, who has almost just returned from his business, notices her. He is a little surprised that his wife suddenly decided to go out for a drink. The girl says she made this decision because she cannot sleep. He offers her his company and tells her that he also cannot sleep at all. Already on the street, Eliseo notices that it is more beautiful here at night than during the day. He asks her if she is cold, and she says that everything is fine. She points out that wine will probably be able to warm them up more. The boy suddenly, carefully takes off his favorite jacket. He carefully puts it on his unconscious wife. The Duke reports that she had better dress in case. The girl realizes that she feels the warmth and the smell of Les very well. She notices that he always tries to take care of her. He hands a glass to his wife and says that the wine is a bit strong, but tastes very good. The girl suddenly realizes that her heart starts beating faster and faster. Taking the glass in one of her hands, she decides that it is time to enjoy the wonderful bouquet. Lessa asks her to drink slowly, otherwise she will get drunk too quickly. Smelling it, the girl notices that the drink has a wonderful smell. The Duke reports that it was specially brought from the city of Tara and is glad that she liked it. Tara was the second largest territory after the capital, and according to rumors, it was a fertile and very beautiful land. She always wanted to go there, so she decided to ask if it was warmer there than where they were. The boy says that normally yes, but sometimes it gets a little colder. The girl says she wants to go there, and when asked if she likes it here, she replies that she likes it too. Suddenly, he asks her to let him know if she feels uncomfortable or something like that. The girl is seriously interested in knowing why he is telling her something like this. Eliseo says that she already understands that he wants to get closer to her. She says that even though they married for benefits, maintaining a good relationship is still excellent. The girl clarifies that she simply didn't want to say anything bad. The Duke asks her if she will regret what she said in the morning, to which he receives a negative answer. They sit facing each other and talk enthusiastically about various topics. Suddenly, the Duchess says that now she also feels very good here. The boy says that, judging by their appearance, they should return home now. A little more time passes, and Eliseo is already sitting at the table, far from sober. With her head on the surface, she thought she would never allow herself to drink in front of the Duke, because his status was much higher than hers. And she didn't even imagine that she would get so drunk in front of him. Suddenly, she says that she is actually different from normal girls. She reports that since childhood she was a kind of loner. The girl says it's not that she didn't have friends, they simply never walked the same path with them. She always liked reading more than dealing with etiquette. She even admits that this greatly annoyed her mother. The boy suddenly wonders if she really thinks that way. Elisha says she is lucky to have found something she really likes to do. She realizes that aristocrats find this strange, despite their skills, and the desire to do it. The girl did not mention her writing, but it was much easier for her. Suddenly, the Duke says that she can do absolutely whatever she wants. He reports that there are no prohibitions for her in his house. The girl thanks him and says that no one has ever told her anything like that. Suddenly, she says that, after all, she is lying and her older brother supported her. She was incredibly grateful to him for all the words he said as support. Suddenly, Eliseo realizes that somehow they have run out of wine. She asks the person sitting opposite what he thinks about another bottle. The Duke was confused by this, because they had already drunk a bottle designed for at least 3 people. He understands that at least one more bottle will be too much. The girl says that since this is exactly her whim, she will get it herself. She asks him to wait here, and the Duke asks her to stop, but she no longer listens to him. Eliseo approaches the place where they were sitting a little earlier with the obtained bottles. When suddenly, she notices something interesting. She sees her husband sitting opposite her, whose eyes were closed for some reason. The girl is very surprised when she realizes that she somehow managed to fall asleep. She notices that he looks handsome even when he sleeps, as always. The Duchess didn't understand at all what she had to do to be so beautiful. Suddenly, the man opens his eyes and, literally a couple of centimeters away, sees his wife's face. At this moment, the girl does not see what is happening in front of her, sincerely hoping that he will not suddenly wake up now. Suddenly, she realizes that he has opened his eyes and sees everything happening in front of him. She jumps aside scared and then apologizes. Eliseo wonders if she was the reason he woke up. The boy suddenly blushes too much for her. He says he just closed his eyes for a minute, although in reality he seems to have fallen asleep. The girl realizes that if she still had too much wine, it would be better if they returned. He says that everything is normal, and she reports that she hopes to drink a couple more bottles. She wonders if he thinks it would be good for them to drink from time to time. Eliseo realizes that her heart almost stopped before because of how close they were. The next morning, the girl wakes up in her bedroom feeling terrible. She strongly doubted that she could sit down to write manuscripts today. It seemed to her that, with such a hangover, she wouldn't be able to write anything, so it would be better to think only about the plot. She wondered if she had at least one idea for the next chapter. The girl, looking at the book, didn't even understand how these images related to the text. Suddenly, she reads something about an adult mandrake and its smell. She realizes that it is not a hangover, and that the book simply contains incorrect information. Still, she decides that it would be better to go buy herbal remedies. A little later, upon entering one of them, the seller tells her that the adult mandrake is a poisonous plant. Famous for its sweet smell, but nevertheless used in medicine. The girl tells him that, when she heard this, she began to understand something. She realizes that aristocrats do not go to herbalists to ask them to explain something and, as she understands, if you mix plants with other medicinal herbs, the body will suffer. The Duchess suddenly asks him if he has any rare medicinal herbs. The man thinks about her question, and after a couple of seconds says that he has something. He says he can find something suitable for her in the warehouse. The seller asks them to wait a little, and then offers to look around the store for now. Eliseo tells her maid that she can ignore her and look around quietly. The Duchess turns around and wonders if there are any herbs here that might interest her. Looking around, she suddenly notices a strange door, assuming it is a warehouse. She decides to take a look at what is happening inside, behind the door in front of her. The girl carefully opens the door and notices that there is a chain holding it from the inside. Inside, she sees a hallway in front of her, where for some reason there was blood on the floor. She quickly closes the door behind her, not wanting to look further at what is there. The girl really hoped it was some kind of accidentally spilled drink. She decides that she must get out of there as quickly as possible so that no one notices her. Eliseo returns and suddenly sees a cheerful Chachu in front of her. The maid reports that there are many medicinal herbs with good effects and aroma. So she thinks it would be good to buy some of them. The Duchess cheerfully says that they should do exactly what she said. After the purchase, the seller thanks his visitors for their visit, inviting them to visit again. He wishes them a good trip, and Chachu assumes that he is simply very happy to have sold so much. Eliseo was glad to have found so many things they needed. However, she was very sorry that she could not acquire many rare herbs. Still, she was able to get some answers to her questions. Sitting in the dining room, the girl asks Dem if the Duke is late. The servant informs her that he is a little busy with work, so he will meet her later. The boy, meanwhile, sits quietly at his desk, closing his eyes. Suddenly he imagines how, when he opens his eyes, his wife is standing in front of him. He smiles sincerely when he imagines such an image. Suddenly someone knocks on the door, and the Duke invites someone outside in. The head of a curious Eliseo suddenly appears slowly behind the door. Upon entering, she realizes that he is sleeping and does not understand who answered her then. Obviously, something had changed too much in her these last few days. She extends her hand, realizing that now she wants to play a little. Abruptly opening his eyes, the Duke suddenly grabs his wife by the wrist. The girl asks him if he knew she had entered, and he informs her that his servant would not have come that close. She, indignant, asks him why he decided to pretend to be asleep. Answering a question with another question, the boy wonders what she planned to do. Thinking that he was asleep, he asks her if she likes teasing people so much. When asked if she finished working, the boy says he decided to take a short break. And think. She notices that he hasn't even eaten, to which she receives a negative answer. The Duke suddenly gets up from his desk and asks his wife to sit in his place. She sits in a chair and tells him that he shouldn't have done that. This action on his part made the girl too embarrassed. The boy asks her why she didn't come to him immediately when she woke up. And she tells him that she got up late today and yesterday she was focused on the manuscript. Suddenly, he assumes that writing is probably quite difficult for her. She asks him not to make fun of her, realizing that Lessa considers her an amateur writer. The boy suddenly wonders if she started reading the books he gave her. She had no idea how to answer because she was incredibly embarrassed. The girl happily says that she has read almost all of them except one. He smiles slightly when he hears his wife's answer to his question. Eliseo realizes that he takes care of his books and says that seeing them in such excellent condition really cheered her up. The Duke says that it is because these books are too dear to him. She suggests that he really likes this author, and the boy says that he liked the writing style. And he thinks that these books should help her write her own novel, and he also thinks that she will be able to bring something new to the world of new literature. The girl understands that this is really a compliment from her reader. She says that she came up with a couple of plots while reading. Suddenly her husband says that, to his great regret, something happened. The boy shares that the author suddenly stopped publishing books, and this worries him a lot. He reports that the final volume of the book is not yet in stores. The girl couldn't even imagine that she was such an irresponsible writer in the eyes of her readers. Only she and Sarah really knew that the final volume was being written at that moment. Leza says that the author should have thought about the readers and finished the novel. He seriously informs her that she should definitely learn a lesson from this. The boy asks her to take more books because they are also good. Sad because she literally heard the criticism of her reader, the girl says she should leave. She realizes that she has suddenly turned pale and he should accompany her. But she refuses. Eliseo, looking at him sadly, finally wishes him good night. She was uncomfortable because she had an uncomfortable reader. Walking down the hallway, she meets Chachu, who asks her if everything is okay. The girl says everything is fine, just that she is a little tired. Upon entering her room, she quickly hides under the blanket, as if hiding from her worries. Fearfully, she begins to think that she is a really bad writer. In the morning, the Duke suddenly realizes that someone's dress quickly disappears around the corner. In fact, it was Eliseo, carefully hiding from her husband. She knew she had no reason to avoid meeting him, but upon seeing him, despair flooded her again after his words. After a while, the girl was again lying at her desk, realizing that she didn't want to do anything, and just wanted to relax. Suddenly, standing up, she realizes that she has rested enough. It was too painful for her to hear such caustic words from a reader who had limited edition books. She decides that she needs to keep writing no matter what. After a while, Eliseo finishes and decides that she has had enough for today. Her body ached a lot from sitting all day. Deciding to take a walk before bed, she realizes that walking at dawn is quite pleasant. Suddenly, a familiar voice is heard from behind, suggesting that she has had a difficult day. The girl turns around and sees her satisfied husband in front of her. The boy starts to approach, but suddenly she asks him not to come closer. He asks worriedly what happened and if there is any reason for it. The Duke assumes she is angry with him, and she replies that she is already in her nightgown. He comes closer and asks if she has any problems. She no longer understood what she was doing, because their meeting would still have been inevitable. Suddenly, the boy assumes that he must have bothered her in some way. She says that this is not the case at all, to which he replies that everything is written on her face. Forcing a smile, she says that in reality not everything is like that. The boy smiles and finally begins to believe her words. She looks away pitifully, mentally realizing that she just lied. The girl says that the story she is about to tell does not belong to her, but to an acquaintance of her friend, who has you as a close friend. She reports that recently he told her that he writes novels. Then she says that this man is not famous at all, so she doesn't know what books came from his pen. Eliseo reports that due to some circumstances, he could not continue writing and abandoned the matter. She says that this could happen to anyone and believes that it would be difficult to share it with strangers. Afterwards, the girl says that her precious manuscripts should be finished, but the writer flatly refuses to do so. Trying to summarize her story, she thinks for a moment. Eliseo says that it is not always possible to understand the true feelings of the author when reading his books. She also reports that sometimes she loses inspiration and is less productive. The boy suddenly says that he has no idea what they are talking about now, and then wants to say something. Suddenly he thinks about it and decides that, after all, he should not continue. Eliseo adds that, at least for the same reason, she cannot finish her novel, and it is sad. At the same time, Lessa thinks that he never knew that his wife was a fan of Phil. And her words must have upset her a lot. He felt a little embarrassed by this, but she was quite cute when she was sad. He apologizes and says he was wrong, after which he suggests they just let the situation pass. The girl asks him to pretend that this conversation did not happen, and then tells him that it is time to go. Suddenly she grabs him by the dress and asks where he is going. The Duke unexpectedly invites her to walk a little longer. Eliseo is embarrassed, realizing that he is inviting her for a walk under the moonlight. She says it is already quite late, and they should go to bed for the night. In reality, she was just looking for an excuse after getting drunk the other night. Suddenly the boy says that, if you think about it, they didn't have their wedding night. He, smiling, remembers that this point was indicated in their agreement. The girl looks at him fearfully and realizes that he wants their first night to happen now. She asks in shock if they should do this right now. Eliseo says he needs to freshen up and that her underwear is too inappropriate. The boy suddenly, smiling, asked her what she was talking about. The girl screams in fear because she wants their first night to happen today. Lessa burst out laughing after hearing such a declaration from her. She blushes, deeply realizing that she realized that not everything was at all as it really was. Fleeing quickly, she tells him that he is acting very vilely. She had no idea exactly who was sticking their tongue out at her at that moment. Lessa asks if she really scared him that much. In reality, she just wanted to spend a little more time together and nothing more. The next day, the girl sat shamefacedly in front of her husband. While patiently waiting for her breakfast, Lessa smiles contentedly at his wife. Dame, standing behind her master, notices that he has changed a lot. She assumed it was about his newly arrived wife. The Duke says he thinks they should go to the estate after the rainy season ends. The girl asks, surprised, if he means the Tara estate. He informs that he usually goes there at this time of year, but perhaps winter will last half a month. Or maybe a whole month. The boy says that it will probably be difficult for him to move around in this weather. The Tara estate was famous for its sea view and the land where there were hot springs, which is why the nobility of the capital loved to go there in winter. Eliseo happily asks if he can try many different wines there. Her husband, confused, replies that her guess is quite correct. She admits that it really excites her imagination. A couple of days later, several boys go horseback riding. Lessa suddenly realizes that one of those present was Chiron, which surprises him greatly. He didn't understand why he was there, and not even in riding gear, if it looked like he had drunk at least a bottle of wine. The prince warns the suddenly appearing one not to speed up too much, because they don't want accidents. He adds that taxes should not be spent on entertainment. Charon says that one would think he could already become emperor. He suggests that the prince was actually upset that his father had not yet passed away. After a while, he approaches the Duke on his horse and asks if he will also participate. Suddenly, although belatedly, he congratulates his friend on his marriage, saying he was very surprised because he would never have thought he would marry the daughter of the Marquis of Weber. The guy adds that he expected the Duke to choose a commoner. He suddenly realizes that he is simply giving a monologue and is not receiving any response. Becoming serious, Lessa says that this is why he constantly fails. Charon, sadly, reports that, according to rumors, after the wedding they never went out into the world. He asks if she thinks this is a very big omission. He leaves in silence, and the boy assumes he might have hurt his pride. Suddenly, the Duke turns his horse towards the one who just spoke. He looks ahead fearfully, not understanding at all what is happening. He suddenly realizes that the Duke was now galloping quickly towards him. Charon, very scared, carefully tries to turn his horse. He falls accidentally because he loses control. As a result, Lessa stops his horse literally 5 centimeters from the fallen man. The guy, angry, wonders if he is even going to kill him. The Duke says, with satisfaction, that he would never dare to do this. After this, Leza leaves in the opposite direction to his enemy. Quran mentally calls him a weirdo. And after a while, it turns out that the horse the guy was riding was decapitated that very night. Eliseo greets her husband and notices that he returned later than usual today. The Duke remembers today's event, and specifically now, it was difficult for him to believe that he was capable of what happened before. But at home with his wife, fortunately, all bad thoughts disappeared. The girl asks him if he had dinner, and it turns out neither of them has eaten yet. In that case, the Duchess happily invites him to have dinner together. Standing behind him, Dam wonders what his lordship ate during the recent meeting. Unfortunately, he understood that if he said that, Chachu would give him the first number. They were standing shaking hands the whole time, so the girl finally decides to interrupt their handshake. Leza says that in that case, they will see each other a little later for dinner. Eliseo, agreeing with him, enters the room with her maid. He looks at her with joy, almost without blinking and without taking his eyes off her. While the servant thinks that the Duke really liked being like this. The boy realizes that his lover is, in fact, painfully unpredictable. The girl suddenly realizes that all her favorite meals were on the table for dinner today. Leza says that this time, he decided to pay more attention to food and drinks. He admits that lately he usually has his head in the clouds, and when he sits down to read books, he gets immersed in them. After the marriage, it became more difficult for him to hide what he did in his free time. However, being a duke's wife had one advantage, because it gave complete freedom of action. And Leza did not follow all her movements. In fact, she would really like to tell him calmly that she is Phil. Realizing that the person sitting opposite is not eating, she asks if he likes the food, and suggests that he try it soon. The Duke says that thanks to her, he will have a very pleasant evening tonight, so he is glad they are having dinner together. Eliseo sits quietly outdoors, reading another book. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the Duke appears, dressed in a special uniform. She remembers that today should be a day off, and then wonders where he went. Lisa reports that he is heading to the riding area. The girl's eyes suddenly light up when she hears about horseback riding. She would like to ride a horse, because even if she gets completely wet, she will still be happy. The girl wonders if she can take her with him to the playground. The Duke looks at her dumbfounded, not expecting such a request at all. He says that if she is not busy, then, of course, she can go with him. The girl jumps up from her seat and says she is free now. She sadly reports that the horse is not ready for her, and then asks if it's a pity. He says it won't take long to get ready, and that they should do it gradually. She is very happy when she hears these comforting words from him. After a while, the Duchess happily gets on the given horse. He asks her if she knows how to control a horse, to which she receives an affirmative answer. She says that she once learned to ride a horse, but after a couple of attempts. She gave up, although she actually studied horse riding since childhood. Because the main character of Return of the Night loved horses. And she wanted to describe it as realistically as possible. Regarding getting on easily, the girl says that some things cannot be forgotten once learned. She tells him that he doesn't have to back her up because she can handle it alone. The boy smiles looking at his wife, already thinking of something of his own. She always wore a dress before, so now he was a little confused seeing her in these clothes. After a while, the girl thinks tiredly that in her heart she is ready to participate in real races and win prizes, but her body says the opposite. She looks at her husband walking ahead and realizes that this won't work, and that she must take care of her shape. The girl assumes that the whole thing was precisely because of her age. After a couple of seconds, she realizes that the fact is that she only walked from the table to the bed. She suddenly realizes that her husband decided to wait for her and slow down a bit. After which she tells him that he can go ahead and not wait for her because she prefers to walk slowly, so she can fully enjoy the views. The boy says that he sometimes likes to drive slowly. Eliseo smiles sweetly and thanks her husband for deciding to please her. To please her. Over time, fatigue continues to appear, but she is improving a lot. The Duke says that, if you think about it, This is the first time they have gone out together, and he means that there is no one around them. She asks him to invite her somewhere at least once in a while, because it's quite fun. He, smiling, suddenly says that it is time for them to return home. After a while, sitting at his office desk, the boy asks her what she just said. Chachu reports that the girl did not spend any of her own money. The man tried to significantly increase his wife's expense budget. But she didn't spend a penny. Just in case, he asks again if the maid is sure that his wife didn't spend anything. It was a marriage of mutual necessity, but he didn't want Alicio to ever regret it. That's why he wanted to give her everything she needed. Suddenly, the Duke becomes interested in what she usually does and how much money she lives on. His wife was not one to seek luxurious clothes, but her clothes could not be considered bad either. But some of her books cost as much as a huge clothing store. Upon hearing her master's last question, Chachu stumbles a bit. The maid reports that her mistress always carries a purse and pays with her money. She adds that the girl always pays in cash and occasionally buys him gifts for no reason. Chachu says that he himself asked for the lady to be comfortable. Thoughtfully, the boy says that he understands her, and that's how it is. Leaning back in his chair, the Duke just sinks a little into his thoughts, realizing that the situation is becoming quite interesting. It turns out that Alicio has another side that he knows nothing about. Huge mountains of gifts cover most of the free space. The girl looks at them surprised, not understanding why or from whom. The maid cheerfully declares that all these are gifts from his lordship. Alicio is very surprised when she realizes that all these are gifts from her husband. And suddenly, more servants appear in the room, saying they have brought more gifts. She understands that there are even more gifts here than those given at the wedding. The girl wondered why he was sending her so many things. Suddenly, opening one of the boxes, she sees beautiful riding clothes inside. The maid reports that her horse will arrive a little later, which greatly surprises the Duchess. The girl nervously thanks Chachu, still deeply shocked by the news just received. Later, the maid says that they will leave her, after which she asks her not to be shy and check all the gifts. While walking in the park with her husband, she decides to turn to him. Alicio wonders if the necklace she wore today suits her well. The boy says she is very kind, and she says he is lying. She, embarrassed, says she should have said it was very beautiful because it was his gift. Hearing this, the Duke smiles and then comments that the necklace looks great on her. She becomes very embarrassed and asks him if he really thinks so. The girl thanks him for the riding uniform and then promises to try it on during the next ride. The Duke says he looks forward to it, and his wife promises him that he will be able to leave her behind. A little later, somewhere in the library, the Duke thanks the maid for her hard work. Chachu calmly tells him that he shouldn't thank her at all. He reveals that she was so diligent in compiling the gift list that she can ask for whatever she wants. She says that serving him and following his orders is already a joy for her. The girl adds that, moreover, the gift that the lady liked the most was chosen by him. Lessa calms down when she suddenly hears this from her. The Duchess realizes that she has finally finished all her work. Leaving her room, she suddenly realizes that her back is about to collapse. She was glad to have dealt with everything a day earlier. Although everything ached, her throat was dry and her eyes tired. It was like taking a weight off her shoulders, but she wanted to sleep like crazy. She decides that she should have breakfast with Les, go to bed, and then review the text one more time. First, she decides to drink water, because otherwise she will soon die of thirst. Suddenly, the Duke appears from behind, confused about where his wife is going. He calls her, but she doesn't answer and decides that she simply didn't hear him. Suddenly, the girl staggers, after which she leans against the first wall she finds, covering her forehead with her hand. He decides that maybe she just wants to be alone. The boy decides to follow her, assuming she is heading to the cafeteria. Alicio thinks it would be better to drink a glass of something strong and then go to bed. Watching where his wife is going, he notices that she turns towards the cellar. The girl suddenly realizes that she can sleep like this all day, but she needs to check everything before tomorrow. She finally decides that it would be much better to do without wine. The girl turns and heads in the other direction, not noticing the Duke, who was literally standing in front of her. The man didn't understand what was happening to his wife, nor did he know where she was going. Upon reaching the dining room, she realizes that there is no water on the table. Although it always seemed to me that there was a teapot here. Distractedly, she runs her hands over the table, trying to feel the glass, and suddenly notices a man's hand holding it in her hand. The girl finally realizes that her husband is serious in front of her. She says that the boy scared her, and then asks when he managed to come. The Duke hesitates to answer her, after which he says he came a short time ago. Eliseo eagerly swallows the water from the glass Lessa gave her earlier. She suddenly wonders why she isn't sleeping at such a late hour. The girl says that she was sleeping, or rather, she was already falling asleep. The Duke suggested that she must have sat in his study all night again. He knew that the girl was probably working hard writing or reading something. Lessa takes the glass away from her and decides to take her to the bedroom. Suddenly, the girl shudders, realizing that she fell asleep standing up. And the person opposite realizes that she wants to go to bed. She says that she definitely needs to have breakfast with him, and he says he sees how tired she is. So he will ask her to prepare food for him when she wakes up. Eliseo says she would like him to join her. Lessa reports that in that case, that is exactly what they will do when she wakes up. The girl tells him that in that case she will sleep a little, and then he will wake her up. She wondered if she could really enter her bedroom. The Duke decided that he couldn't do anything because she asked him to. The girl walks slowly towards her room while he follows her. The door closes, and the Duke is glad not to worry about her. The maid who meets him on the way is surprised to realize that he has already woken up. Suddenly, Lessa asks the girl to tell all the maids not to disturb Eliseo's sleep. The woman opposite says that everything will be done as he asked. Time passes, and the girl finally opens her eyes and wakes up. She didn't realize how long she had slept and hoped it was still morning. Eliseo slowly gets out of bed and realizes how hungry she is. The girl decides that it would be good to go to the dining room now. She opens the door, and her surprised husband appears right in front of her. The Duchess first looks at him surprised and then abruptly closes the door. She understood that he shouldn't see her in pajamas and with a nest on her head. She throws something over herself, opens the door, and wishes the Duke good morning. Smiling slightly, the boy realizes that it has long been evening. She asks if it's true, to which she receives an affirmative answer, and he strokes her hair. When the boy removes his hand, she asks him to pretend he didn't see her like that. She asks him if he has eaten, and then apologizes for being very tired. Lessa says that he realized this, and that's why he didn't wake her up earlier. He reveals that he will now ask the cook to prepare food for both of them. The next morning, the girl went to the tea house and was finally able to read the manuscript. Smiling, she puts a pile of papers on the table and notices that everything is now done as it should be. After completing all the tasks, the tea and dessert seemed especially delicious to her. She decided that it was worth taking time before her book came out. During this time, she had already managed to attend the tea party of Count Dimitri's wife. The Duchess also managed to meet Kiri, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. The girl shared that Elliot told her he wasn't in touch with him. When asked if she saw her brother, she says they just passed the word on. During this time, Eliseo even managed to visit Count Hermann's wife herself. The Countess told her that the necklace she was wearing was incredibly valuable and expensive. The girl was very surprised when she heard this information from her. She says she didn't know because it was a gift. A smile appears on her face when she hears the Countess's assumption that the man apparently likes her very much. A couple of days later, when everything was ready, Sarah shows her the book for the store. And the book with the special cover she ordered. A cheerful girl thanks the person sitting opposite for the work done. Sarah says proudly that she made the cover herself, almost every inch. According to her, not even books for the imperial family have such luxurious covers. Eliseo would really like to please her husband and thought she had done a good job even at the expense of her money. The woman sitting opposite says that they recently bought a batch of books, so in the afternoon they will be on the shelves of the capital's stores. The Duchess wondered if Leza would want her book off the shelves. She really hoped he would like it very much. The girl tells her maid that she wants to run into a store on the main square. For some reason, she started to feel that the book she wanted to give as a gift would stand out too much. She could tell the Duke that she bought it, but she was afraid he would think that she changed the cover herself. To celebrate, she even left her autograph, which seemed too much to her. The girl really didn't know what to do in this situation. She decides to put all thoughts aside and think about it a little later. Looking around, she walks through the bookstore looking for her books. Even though she had already written quite a few, her heart still beat fast when she saw her manuscripts on the shelves. The Duchess finds the book she needs on the shelf and wonders if she should give her husband the most ordinary one. She decides to take the normal one just in case, so she has two to choose from and then goes to the checkout. Upon arriving home, she sits at the table, trying to choose between these two books. She really didn't understand whether she should give him a book with a normal cover or a special one. Suddenly, a familiar male voice is heard from behind, which cannot help but startle you. It was Leza asking when the girl managed to return home. She nervously says that she literally just crossed her threshold. The boy suddenly announces that he bought a book, and she draws attention to what he is holding in his hand. He reveals that this is a new novel, recently published by his favorite author, Phil. Seeing the books on the table, the boy asks her, surprised, if she also decided to buy this book. The girl slowly gets up from her chair, trying to find the right words. She admits that she bought him the book because she knew he loved the author. The girl says that, unfortunately, it seems she was late. It never occurred to her that a boy could buy himself a book. He thanks her. Then he points out that she has no gift, and the Duchess tells him that it is a small thing compared to what he did for her. Leza asks if he can read a book here and now. They sit at the same table, opposite each other, preparing to start reading. The boy happily holds the gifted book in his hands, when suddenly he notices something strange. He sees a book with a special cover in front of him, and says that it seems very expensive to him. After which he asks her who she wants to give it to. The Duke sadly wonders if this is a gift for the lady. The girl quickly refutes his assumption, waving her hands. She stutters and says that she was very lucky recently. The Duchess happily reports that she got this book for free, and it even contains Phil's autograph. She adds that this book was received especially for him. The girl says that this work is unique, and then asks if it is great. Leza excitedly holds the book Eliseo gave him in his hands. She, smiling, asks if it is true that such a book is almost impossible to get. The boy cheerfully says that he will gladly accept this gift. She mentally praises herself for the gift she gave to her happy husband. The girl asks what if they continue reading together after dinner. She tells him that it is very cold today, and then offers to read at a table in her room. Eliseo is very surprised when she suddenly hears about her chambers from him. She tries to make sure that this is just reading, nothing more. A little later, after eating, they sit not far from each other and read. Suddenly, the girl realizes that he is holding the wrong autograph book that she gave him in his hands. Although it was strange to her, she felt very sad. Leza, as if reading her thoughts, reports that that book is in a different place. In fact, he felt a little sorry for reading the books his wife gave him. He wrapped the gift in a soft cloth and put it in the safe, and this one in another. She was a little upset, but she couldn't do anything about it. Slightly distracted from reading, she looks closely behind the book and wonders if her husband is interested. She was very worried, because it was very important for her to know if the Duke liked Phil's new work. From his concentrated gaze, she realized that he was definitely interested. The girl decides to take a look and try to read her own book again. After a couple of seconds, she is disappointed and realizes that it is quite boring to read a book more than a dozen times. Time passes, and the Duke notices that his wife is almost falling asleep. Suddenly, she warns him that she will go to her room and go to bed. The boy supports her and tells her that he should also go to bed. Suddenly, Leza says that tonight they can go to bed together. Eliseo looks at him surprised, not expecting such a proposal at all. She says that they cannot do this because it is a violation of their own contract. In fact, she was still ashamed to show him her strange habits. He gets up from his chair and says he wants to accompany her to her room. They walk slowly together down the corridor towards their rooms. He wishes her good night and informs her that he will carefully keep her gift. Smiling slightly, the girl sincerely thanks him for these words. The last thing she said was to wish her husband good night. She was glad that the boy liked it, even though she hadn't read that book today. A book bought with a normal cover was finally hers. For the first time in his life, Duke could not concentrate on Phil's book. While reading, he was constantly distracted by the scent of Alicio sitting next to him. He thought that if he didn't read, he would simply return to his office. That's why all this time, he silently pretended to look closely at every line. Finally, he was able to correctly read a new work by his favorite author. The boy suddenly realizes that something is wrong and notices that the atmosphere of the book is completely different from what it was before. Previously, in Phil's novels, things happened that are difficult to happen in life. But in this book, despite the fictional plot, there was a lot in common with reality. And the relationship between a man and a woman, who were previously cold to each other, improved significantly. This gave him a strong sense of déjà vu, but he couldn't remember anything. He decides that this is due to the similarity with the main character, as he also had dark hair and golden eyes. The boy decides that it is most likely just his mood and nothing more. Alicio, lying in her bed, could not sleep due to worry about the synopsis of the next volume of The Return of the Night. In the morning, looking at the papers on the table, the girl realizes that her book will not end in the 20th volume. Initially, 20 parts and a small additional episode were planned, but apparently we will have to make the 21st volume. She decides that, no matter what, it is worth printing these volumes together. She suddenly thinks that the manager might have problems with this. The girl decides that she will try to shorten the book during the editing process. The Duke enters the dining room and sees that there is no one else besides him and the maid. He understands that lately his wife spends days and nights in her office without even stopping to eat. Since he had some errands to do before leaving, he often had to skip dinner. The boy started seeing his beloved wife less and less. This happened despite the fact that they had recently become quite close. He sadly observes that now everything happens at the wrong time. After a while, the boy sits in his office at the table, reading the book she gave him. He was putting away an autographed book, which he had never opened before, and it turned out that only now would he look at it properly. Suddenly, a piece of paper falls out of the book, which greatly surprises the Duke. The boy decides that one of the pages fell out, which is why he was afraid that the book was of poor quality. He reads the content of the fallen paper and notices something terribly strange. Alicia is sitting at her desk when she suddenly realizes that for some reason she is not calm at all. Usually, anxiety appeared when deadlines started approaching. But now she had plenty of time. Meanwhile, the Duke compared two pieces of paper and looked closely at the handwriting. When he compared it with Phil's previously received letter, it became clear to him that these two papers were written by the same person. The boy is sitting in the garden, lost in thought, when he suddenly hears a familiar female voice. Alicio asks him if he is surprised, and then asks what he is doing here. He doesn't answer, and she asks him if he feels unwell. Lisa reports that he is barely breathing fresh air, a little embarrassed. She excitedly asks if her husband is sure that everything is fine now. The girl sits not far from him and tells him that if he is sick, he should rest. Suddenly, she says that she would like to ask something about the book she was given. She asks where his wife managed to acquire this copy. Initially, she knew that Lessa might ask about this, but not this morning. The girl, just as she had rehearsed, begins to talk about how her friend has connections in that publishing house. She reports that he has been absent several times recently for some business. The boy wonders if it turns out that his friend bought this book. She confirms his assumption, after which she asks if something bad happened to the book, to which she receives a negative answer. Leza cryptically says that the book must have been very difficult to obtain. Smiling, the girl says that in reality, everything was exactly like that. The Duke suggests inviting this friend somewhere for a party, for example. He suddenly reports that he noticed that he was not giving her the necessary attention. Eliseo says that this friend is very shy and bad at meeting people. She mentally apologizes in tears to her manager Sarah. The boy finally finishes the interrogation about his gift. The girl exhales in relief, realizing that she managed to get away. Suddenly, the Duke asks her if she has any plans for today. She says she didn't plan anything, and then asks if he wanted to ask for something. He says he has something slightly different in mind, and asks her not to leave the estate today. Leza explains this by saying that it is quite dangerous outside this house. She asks if it is dangerous enough not to leave the house, and then wonders if something happened again. Covering her face with her hand, she simply asks him to forget what he just said. Having stood up, she says it's time for her to take care of her business. Eliseo smiles and takes care of him, realizing that he needs to rest. She was worried because her husband constantly pretended that everything was fine. After a while, the guy sits at his office desk while his servants whisper quietly among themselves. They talked about how strange his lordship was today, and he even checked every paper and sealed it. The Duke aggressively hits his desk with his fist, scaring the poor servants. They ask him what just happened, and he says everything is fine. Meeting his wife a little later, he decides to offer her something. He wanted to have a drink with her a little later, closer to the evening. The girl happily accepts, almost without hesitation. She says it's been a long time since they drank like that together. The Duke is happy because he has barely found a suitable reason to talk. The boy looks at his watch aggressively, not understanding why time is stopping. He decides that the problem is that the clock is simply broken or the meeting is too late. Looking in the mirror, he wonders if he should change his clothes now. Leza decides that he prefers to look like a tomb than smart. A little more time passes, and he finally goes out. The boy tries to find his wife with his eyes, but so far sees nothing. And he decides that she confused the time or forgot about the meeting. At the same moment, Eliseo suddenly appears, apologizing for being a little late. She asks him how long he has been waiting for her, and he replies that he just arrived. The Duke tells a story, and the girl is very surprised when she hears it. She says it was very exciting to hear this news from him. In fact, it also gave her an idea for the next episode. She decides that as soon as she returns, she will make a mental note. Turning her attention to her interlocutor, she wonders why he is looking at her so intently. He asks her if she needs anything while thinking that her handsome husband is really a threat to her life. The girl reports that everything is fine, and he asks her if she has enough books in the library. She decides that the boy learned something from Chachu and says that she will notify you immediately if she needs anything. But for now, everything is very good. The Duke, hearing this, seems to get a little angry but still smiles. He asks her to contact him at any time, for any reason. Leza says that he should not tolerate any inconvenience in his house. With a sincere smile, the girl thanks him for such kind words. She felt ashamed of deceiving a person who said such things to her. This is why she often had a very strong burning sensation somewhere in her chest. The drug dealers captured the first time were not easy to subdue, even if they were tortured. Lessa reports that they made many raids to escape. However, he states that after increasing security, the fugitives were caught when they tried to hide in another area. The prince looks down bewildered, thinking a little. The Duke was worried that before leaving for Tara, he would be worried if this problem was not resolved. But fortunately, things worked out a little. Although there were still many cases to resolve, the person sitting opposite takes a small bottle in his hand and asks his interlocutor if he knows what it is. The boy says that cocoon is very hallucinogenic and addictive, and that's why, in the past, during the war, it was also used to turn soldiers into living weapons. Leza says that this is why, since the reign of the previous emperor, the circulation of cocoon has been prohibited. It turned out that they were trying to distribute such dangerous hallucinogens again, violating state law. The prince points out that this is a very serious crime. He says that even the escaping gangs will save their skins first, so that they can be given a break. Suddenly, the boy mischievously asks when the Duke will go to Tara. Leza says that this will happen in the near future. The person sitting opposite carefully asks his interlocutor to take care of himself. When asked if he will go with his wife, Leza replies yes. Sitting at her desk, Eliseo looks at the box that was once given to her. It contained a beautiful hand that made the girl smile. She only accepted it because she felt guilty about the Duke's constant rejection of gifts. After she gave him a signed copy of The Uncommon Witch, he became incredibly kind. She had no idea how she should be with her husband now. In fact, the girl also wanted to get closer to the Duke. She thought it would be difficult for him to contain his reaction when he found out that she wrote fantasy novels. It seemed to her that now was the best time to confess. The Duchess remembers that she didn't write a single letter today. Usually, when work stalled, she started needing someone to talk to and to trust. And in fact, it would be wonderful if this person was a husband who would spend his whole life with her. However, as she thought, she was still very scared. She wanted to get to know him a little better, without rushing things. The girl understood that no matter how good Leza was, this fact would remain unknown to him. It seemed to her that if he found out that she was Phil, he might throw away all her books. She decides that if the expectation is great, then the disappointment is great, so she should expect nothing. In fact, Eliseo herself did not understand her own feelings at all. Dame brings her master a document containing the results of a writing test. The Duke takes a quick look at the paper he just received. He suddenly addresses his service and tells him that he has business with him. The boy asks him to find out everything he can about a descriptor named Phil. He says that people from the publishing house or the Imperial investigator should be interrogated. Using any method. Something strange was written on the paper that fell out of the donated book that day. He was surprised when sketches written in Phil's handwriting appeared, but he didn't understand at all how to perceive the fact that next to his name, Leza, there was a signature of her husband. Even a test showed that these two writings are completely identical. He remembers what he managed to tell his wife during all this time. Then he said that the author, without finishing the novels, suddenly suspended his activities indefinitely. It was for this reason that the last volume was not published for so long. He said that he didn't think he was such an irresponsible writer when he bought the books. The boy, very sad, is trying to understand how he can be in such a situation. Kyron, falling heavily and holding his head, thinks that he doesn't have enough of this at all. Now he couldn't relax at all precisely because of this deficiency. Some people were caught and the rest had to escape, and the supply of cocoons suddenly stopped. Suddenly, Count Mael enters the room and asks what happened to His Highness. Suddenly, the Count takes a bottle out of his pocket and asks if this is what he is looking for. Chiron suddenly almost pounces on him and asks him to give him the bottle. The man quickly withdraws his hand, preventing him from getting what he wants. He cunningly says that nowadays it is not so difficult to get it. The boy suddenly wonders what he should do to get at least a little. Mael looks at the person in front of him and realizes that he is already at a serious stage of addiction. Until recently, his position was observation, but now it is no longer so. The man says that if he wants to get the cocoon, then he should work. He says that first of all he needs to get rid of the traps placed around the imperial court. And of him. The Count reports that if he also falls into the hands of the prince's crowns, then he will not be able to continue receiving supplies. At that moment, he was seriously thinking that they would never catch him. The Duke and his wife sit opposite each other during their next meal. Suddenly, the girl's hand begins to tremble and she feels pain, after which she hides her hand under the table. The Duchess says that lately her hand and arm hurt. She shows how she copes with the pain, after which everything immediately disappears for her. The boy understands that, in fact, this is most likely due to the fact that she holds the pen for a long time. This made him believe in the fact that she was the author Phil. He wonders what if they organize a tea party after dinner. The girl says that she is busy today, so, in her opinion, they won't make it. Dame walks slowly down the street, thinking about how tired she is. These days, although she gets up 3 hours earlier than usual and starts working. Her work has no end. She was supposed to help her lordship and bring him news from Tara. She also went to report on the well-being of the capital and to study important matters, and insignificant ones of the duchy. And the most difficult thing was to find all the information about Phil. The most difficult condition in this matter was to find out everything without coercion or violence. She had no choice but to find out about him by any means. She tried hard and submitted applications, but the publishing house seemed to take a lot of water. And he believed that the writer was hiding very well. Suddenly, she hears someone's familiar voice and sees her lover in front of her. At that moment, she was holding a piece of paper with a plot outline of the return of the night. The girl says that she just went for a walk, but in reality, the last chapter of her book didn't work out. So she walked and put her thoughts in order. She asks him why he didn't leave earlier, as usual, and the boy says that lately he has too many things to do. Alicio worriedly asks if the boy has eaten anything today. She felt ashamed because she had never had a face-to-face conversation with her lover. He says he has been working the whole time, and the girl points out that she should scold the Duke. Because if such a wonderful subordinate falls ill, it will be difficult. Dame says he simply lacks the skills. That's why he has a couple of cases, and his lordship always takes care of him. The girl, smiling slightly, asks him not to overdo it. She says he is an important person whom his lordship trusts. The boy had no idea he could hear such praise from his lover. He says that she is actually praising him a little too much. Elisha wishes him luck with his work and then slowly lets him go. He quickly says goodbye to her before she leaves completely, hoping she will hear him. Mentally, the boy idolizes her and calls her the best lover. Even though she hadn't slept all night, the Duchess was in a good mood. And that's why she didn't feel tired at all. She finally managed to finish the 20th volume of Return of the Night. Of course, there were still some improvements to be made, as well as volume 21. However, she thought she could meet some deadlines before heading to the container. She had no idea she would actually be able to do this. If she can hold on a little longer and finish the next volume, then the end of Return of the Night that everyone was waiting for will arrive. The servant, gently massaging the girl's body, asks if anything hurts, reporting that her shoulders and arms are very tense. She says that now it seems like he is letting her go a little because it was a very tough night. The servant says that, as expected, newlyweds are different, which causes misunderstandings at the Lyceum. Chachu enters the room and asks what kind of food they should prepare. The Duchess says she would really like to eat meat today. She wanted something nutritious, and stew would be a good option. In addition, she also ordered food that is good for regaining physical strength. The maids suddenly say that oysters and snails are good for physical strength and beauty. The Duchess says she thinks she will get indigestion after such a breakfast. One of the girls reminds them that they are newlyweds, and Alicio doesn't understand at all how this relates to that topic. The Duchess asks a maid named Casey if she has something stuck to her face. The girl says she looks simply amazing, which surprises her lover. She reports with admiration the way he reads the newspaper, holding it gracefully in his hands. He looks very good. Elisha says that then she should read the newspaper with her, and it turns out that the maid still hasn't managed to learn the imperial language. The girl reveals that they can both tell her if they ever want to learn. They look at the lover with admiration, not believing their own ears. One of them says that someone like her doesn't dare to cause trouble for the lover. The Duchess states that it is not such a difficult matter, so if she is interested, she can ask at any time. She had already taught Lily basic imperial language before, so it would be even easier for her the second time. Suddenly, a girl reads in her newspaper about a writer Estius. The actions of the nobles of the Golden Century, which he described, take place in the highest aristocratic society. And they are associated with the vanity and passionate feelings of the representatives of the upper classes. This book is popular for its controversial narrative and harsh criticism of aristocratic society. The book costs approximately a month's salary for a worker, and most people who read it would only be aristocrats. So for such a story to be published as a book, it was clear that the author wanted the aristocrats to see it firsthand. Despite freedom of the press, since the main consumer group is identified, the writer was quite careful with the material for writing the book. As he goes up the stairs, the Duke assumes he has given his servant too difficult a task. Several days had passed since he told him to find all the information about Phil. And there was still no news. He wanted to know at least one more detail about the writer, even something insignificant. For example, if he had a favorite type of pen. He thought about it and realized that Alicio is really like him, because when he asks her if she needs anything, she just smiles and says she is happy with her life in the duchy. He had no choice but to get to know her step by step and take care of her. For example, donating a limited edition premium desk sold by minorities in the South, and that it is currently being transported by ship. It was a table made of century-old trees that only grow there, and most likely one was made or twice a year. And it is also said that the table is so hard that it does not deteriorate even after several decades. It also has a relaxing aroma, making it ideal for long hours of reading. The boy assumed that Alicio would feel uncomfortable, although he hadn't told her yet. And if his wife suddenly needed a book, he ordered everything to be prepared so that, even if this book, which cannot be bought in the Empire, was here, he wanted to bring her joy so that she would open her heart to him even more. Suddenly, his eyes open, and he realizes what he just thought. He didn't know why he was going this far now when he thought about his wife. Lost in thought, he holds his head with one hand and frowns slightly. When he goes out into the hallway, he leaves the door open, expecting Alicio to come down the stairs again and shake his hand. And indeed, this is undoubtedly how she always appeared before his eyes. He is constantly tormented by the curiosity to know if, besides him, she shakes hands with someone else with a radiant fish. The more he filled his head with such stupid thoughts, the worse his mood became. For him, it was enough that she only looked at him, and he really hoped that she shared the same feelings with him. Finally, he began to admit that his character had changed a little. Leza constantly gave her wonderful gifts, and of course they were good. But it was a bit burdensome for the girl. The Duchess was thinking about this, standing outdoors in the garden, when she suddenly saw the silhouette of her husband in the distance. As he approached, the boy suddenly asked her if she liked performances. Smiling, Alicio enthusiastically says that she likes them very much. The Duke offers to watch one of them together if she is not busy. The girl was happy that she had finished her work and could now do what she wanted with peace of mind. Already seated in their place, the Duke talks about how this famous traveling company, which travels across the continent, will stay here for a month and perform. Alicio reports that they are apparently really famous because there was a big commotion in the hall. Thunderous applause erupts, and the show finally begins. Trying to figure out the essence of the performance, he suggests that the reason lies in the aristocrats, who are incessantly sarcastic. What immediately came to mind were the nobles of the Golden Age she had recently seen. Of course, the atmosphere and setting were very different from those in the book. She wondered if the aristocrats were really so amused by the fact that the traveling troupe was foreign. Alicio's world was changing quite fast, but she didn't notice it. Having finished watching the performance, they leave the hall, and the girl notices that the musical composition was very good. Lessa feared that his wife would not be interested, but seeing her expression, he thought that. After all, she was delighted. She had heard somewhere that the more writers see and experience, the better they write. And this was an uncommon performance in the capital, so she really wanted to show it to him. Suddenly, Alicio approaches her husband and then apologizes, saying she was pushed. Suddenly, a large crowd appears where they were walking, not letting them pass. Because there were too many people, the Duke and his wife were too close to each other. The girl carefully asks him if he understands that it was unintentional. Smiling, he says that, in his opinion, it is quite the opposite. The guy suggests leaving and waiting until all the people have passed, and it is safe. Having a little doubt, the girl still accepts his proposal. The Duke had no idea at what point his head had become completely filled with his wife. He supposed it was because he found out that Eliseo was his favorite writer. The girl was a little confused because she saw that the people had already passed, but he still wouldn't let her go. The boy didn't mind because Elisha's world disappeared into Phil's text, which he liked so much. And in the end, there was only one thing he really liked. It was his precious wife Eliseo, who was in front of him now. The girl suddenly says that apparently people have finally arrived. She suggests they eat somewhere nearby since it was already late. Having finally let his wife go, he accepts her proposal. Lessa had no idea what would happen if he told his wife that he seemed to be falling in love with her. He supposed she would be very surprised, but he couldn't imagine how much. Soon they are sitting at the table opposite each other and eating, when suddenly the girl asks if there will be a full moon soon. He suddenly smiled and asked the person sitting opposite if he remembered. The day they met, she talked about how madly she loved the moon and the stories associated with it. The Duke says he perfectly remembers the day they met. She points out that that night was really very uncomfortable. The girl says that then she couldn't even think that she would feel so comfortable with him. The Duke asks again about comfort, trying to make sure that is exactly what she said. To which he receives a positive answer. He suddenly wonders if it will be comfortable for him to live these days with her. The Duke, smiling, says he shares these feelings with her. She suddenly says that the drinks here are really delicious, and then asks her husband to try them. The boy realizes that Dame chose a really great place. He wondered if the girl would one day tell him that she was Phil. A knock is heard at the Duke's office, and Elisha enters with a large pile of books. After which Dame suddenly runs up and offers his help. Does he give charity to the servant who helps her? To which he smiles slightly. The girl says she came to return the books he lent her, after which she wonders if he is so busy even on weekends. The Duke says he was just talking to the servant and nothing more. Dame is about to leave when suddenly Eliseo thanks him again for his help. Smiling, the servant asks permission to deviate. The girl says that, although it is not the first time she has seen the office, she is still amazed by its beauty and scale. Suddenly, Leza realizes that she and her servant seem to have become very close. Eliseo reports that they were just exchanging greetings at dawn. Smiling, she slyly says that this is their little secret together. Suddenly, her husband's expression begins to change, which scares her a lot. He suddenly says that he also wants to know what their greeting means. She feels uncomfortable and says that there is nothing special about it, and they just met several times at dawn. And they greeted each other. The Duke asks if it was just this, to which he receives an affirmative answer. He decides to change the subject and says that if she wants to look around the office, she can look around. The girl cheerfully says that in that case, she will take this opportunity. She takes a book from the shelf and looks at it enthusiastically. Almost immediately, placing the book back in its place, she asks him if he has always liked books so much. He reports that it's not that he loved them, but that he often managed to receive them. As a child, he spent all his time in the library. The girl suddenly wonders if the imperial family has a library, and then asks if they have the most books in the empire. The boy says that no matter how much he wants to admit it, everything is exactly like that, after which he says that if she wants, she can also use the imperial library. Eliseo is really interested in this and asks if it is true. The Duke says that she seems to have forgotten that her husband belongs to the imperial family. Awkwardly scratching his head, he says that in reality everything is like that. She asks him if she can borrow 2 books from him and then shows him which ones she liked. Eliseo gets consent, so she happily starts down the stairs when she suddenly stumbles. The Duke immediately runs to her and shouts her name with concern. She opens her eyes when she suddenly realizes that she did not fall to the floor at all. Horrified, she gets up and asks if the boy lying under her at that moment is okay. The girl receives a positive answer, but still asks if everything is fine. He says that everything is definitely fine, after which he remembers that something similar happened at their first meeting. Eliseo suddenly asks him angrily if he is joking, to which he laughs a little. He wonders if they should call Dame, and then asks if she hurt her head, and if she can move it. Leza reports that he was not seriously injured, so she doesn't have to worry too much. In fact, at that moment, his right hand hurt incredibly. He couldn't afford to tell Eliseo this because she had turned pale with fear. The boy tries to get up when suddenly she asks him if his right hand hurts. He finally admits that he still feels a little pain. She suddenly says that this won't work, so he should still call Adam. And the doctor. The girl is horrified when the doctor suddenly announces that her husband has broken his arm. Going into a little more detail, the man says that it seems his bone is broken. He says that since they took a while and the arm was swollen, it will take about a day to see the exact effects. The doctor suddenly wonders at what event he injured himself like this. Smiling slightly, the boy declares that it was just a small mistake. The man reports that his arm needs to be checked for at least a week. And if the symptoms last longer, it could take 2 to 4 weeks. They are given painkillers and medication to reduce swelling. The doctor says he will see them again tomorrow morning, and Dane says he will go say goodbye to the man. Being alone with the patient, Eliseo asks him if her husband is okay. He says everything is very well and she shouldn't worry. The girl recounts that when she got hurt, she said the same thing, but in reality she received a fracture. She asks him what he will do with things, and he says he will recover quickly. So he will have to postpone the trip to Tara. The girl says it is her fault, and until he gets better, she will help him with all her might. She says that Dam will help him outside the estate, but she is at home. Suddenly, the Duke cries out in a little pain, and she wonders if his arm hurts a lot. She asks worriedly if she should call the doctor again. Bombarding him with questions, she wonders if the man examined him well and why he recently changed his words from fracture to crack. The boy says it doesn't hurt much, but it seems his arm hurts a little. Eliseo sadly tells him that she can do anything for him. He felt a little uncomfortable, but he knew it would be very helpful for a while. He asks her if she is really willing to do something, to which he gets a positive answer. The Duke says that she promised him and that he should not forget it. Starting today, she had to help Lessa until his arm recovered. The girl carefully knocks on the door, waiting for permission to enter, which she receives almost immediately. She is surprised that her husband arrived at his office so quickly, because she expected to arrive faster than him. Leza calmly says that he came a little while ago, trying not to bother her too much. She asks him if his arm hurts at night, and he says that, at least a little. Yes. He suddenly, smiling, reports that perhaps his arm hurts even more. The boy is surprised that she decided to change her hairstyle, and his wife reveals that she just tied her hair up carefully so she could work harder. Suddenly, she asks him if it looks strange to him. He says it is quite normal, and even something like a ponytail. The girl suddenly becomes sad and asks him if he just said the ponytail thing. She sarcastically says that she is very grateful for such a compliment. The Duke says that if she decides to put aside the difficult things, Dam will take care of it. Eliseo says that in that case, her help will be meaningless. She sees a paper, asks if she can read it, and gets permission. The girl slowly reads the content, after which she is very surprised. She tries to pronounce the word written on the paper, which she does not succeed in with much success. The word she saw in front of her sounded like a Maltese name, even though the country was Sorin. She tells the boy that this is an import certificate for goods for the imperial family. The Duchess says that the items come from Sorin, but the name is definitely Maltese. She reveals that Sorin does not have some pronunciations for the word, and that both countries are enemies. Which is a bit funny. The guy assumes that this man simply decided to emigrate. She says it is possible, but asks if it is difficult to live in a country with a Maltese name, because there must be severe discrimination there. Eliseo says that it was very surprising anyway. The person sitting suddenly asks her if she knows a foreign language. He knew that the Maltese state could not be reached by taking an ocean liner. Whether it was a close union state or not, it must have been difficult to learn a language unless one had a great interest in it. The girl didn't understand what she should say, as she hadn't seen that language, except for those times when she tried to find names for characters. She only knew a few words, so it was a pity to say that she understood at least something of this language. Eliseo reports that she was only a little interested because she saw some things. But she had already forgotten everything. The Duke says it is better to set these documents aside just in case. He decides to suggest that we finish this for today. The boy says his arm hurts, and she asks him not to strain himself too much. He tells her that she must rest so that everything passes, so she shouldn't worry. The Duke realizes that being disabled is not so bad. Together, they agree to have a small tea party after dinner. Approaching the table where her husband was sitting, Eliseo decides she wants to play a prank on him. Suddenly, the boy quickly grabs her hand without allowing her to move. She asks him if he knew she was coming, to which he receives a positive answer. The girl asks what if he lets go of her hand, and Leza says he doesn't want to do that. She seriously promises that she will not try to play any more pranks on him. The boy lets go of her hand, and she realizes that when he looks at her like that, her heart sinks. Chachu approaches them and tells them that if they need anything else, they can tell her at any time. Eliseo tries the dessert and suddenly breaks into a smile because of how wonderful it is. The Duke himself begins to smile involuntarily upon seeing the joy of the girl sitting opposite him. She wonders why he is looking at her so strangely. The boy says he does this because his wife is also a beauty. She shyly asks him why he decided to say this now. He gets up from the table and says that today he would like to propose something. The Duke gently takes her hands and tells her that it would be nice if they could spend more time together. He also warns her that he has a second option if she doesn't want to do it. The girl suddenly quickly exclaims that she doesn't mind at all. She reports that, since he says so, she will try to reduce the minimum work pace and dedicate much more time. The boy realizes that he would also like to spend the night with her. She looks at him surprised, not understanding what he is trying to tell her. The Duchess says that it will be a little difficult to see each other at night. She says that at this time of day people really need to sleep. The boy wonders if this has anything to do with his topic. She reminds him that they agreed to sleep separately. He says it was just a dream and they can sign a new contract anyway. Les Edgitro reports that they also have a clause about the heir. He says that's why they should get even closer. And the girl says she is aware of it, but for her it was too sudden. The boy realizes that he only meant that he wants to get closer to her. Hesitantly, he says that she wants this too, but there is a small problem. She asked him not to rush too much and that she could still get some sleep today. The girl wonders what if they talk the next day. The Duke says that in that case, they should talk tomorrow. After a while, Eliseo sits angrily at the table reading the latest newspaper. It was written there that the author of The Nobles of the Golden Age, Estius, and the author of The Return of the Night, Phil, are the same person. She reads the article a little further, but then can't stand it and angrily crumples it. Suddenly, a maid approaches her and tells her that breakfast is ready. The Duchess says she suddenly urgently needs to go on a business trip. She asks the maid to contact Sarah because she urgently needs to talk about something. The girl also asks her to buy the book The Nobles of the Golden Age as soon as the bookstores open. She sincerely thanks Chachu for the fact that the maid is trying for her. Before leaving, she approaches the Duke and tells him that she needs to go somewhere. And he tells her that everything is fine. She thanks him when she suddenly notices today's newspaper on his desk. Eliseo suddenly decides to tell him something after thinking about it for a while. She realizes that she almost let slip that Sicius is not Phil. She says that nothing happened and that now she will get ready and return after lunch. She leaves, first asking him not to strain himself too much with his sore arm. The Duchess did not want to cause any misunderstanding with him. Sitting at the tea table, she asks Sarah who Estius really is. The manager sadly says that this is still not within her competence. She admits that she is incredibly interested in knowing what devil came up with that absurd article. Sarah reveals that she has sent a request to check how it was published and in the first place. Tomorrow, a column from her editor will be published revealing the truth that Estius is not Phil. She also says that she has been watching this author lately because he has been at the center of much controversy. The girl pauses in the story and lowers her head confused. The next day, Alicio quickly grabs the newspaper and starts reading the news. Today's article was on the front page. So many readers of The Return of the Night probably saw it too. They planned to do their best, but since the acquittal article could not appear on the front page, it was impossible to avoid all the damage that had already been done. Moreover, there will probably be those who do not believe these refutations. It was proposed above to slightly postpone the release of the 20th volume of Return of the Night. Because, no matter what, due to problems, the sales level may drop or damage may be caused to the author himself. After editing the manuscript they handed over, it would be best to publish the volume after a few months of observing people's reactions. Alicio decides not to get angry because it's only a few months. She was angry and at the same time annoyed that Estius himself did not explain the situation to her. She understood that he was well aware that he was not Phil. Standing on the balcony, the girl curses out loud, which Chachu, confused, notices. The next day, Elisha realizes that Phil's explanation was on the front page of the newspaper. She was stressed by the fact that the manager said such a thing was impossible to do. But still, she could finally exhale. She was also a little worried that people would see articles about Phil more than about Estius. And she wasn't sure what to do if she had already moved the schedule forward. As she walked in the garden, she noticed that it was a particularly beautiful day today. And maybe it was because the explanatory article had been successfully published. She felt like she was taking a walk after quite some time. Suddenly she sees her husband near her, which cannot help but please her. She wonders how he feels and if his arm suddenly hurts. Duke says it was just a small crack, and that's why he is recovering without any problems. Alicio is very happy about this and feels at least some relief. The boy suddenly says that he has thought very carefully about something recently. He reports that yesterday he reviewed their prenuptial agreement and thought there were too many loopholes. Leza says that, no matter what, it would be better if they made changes to the contract.